Okay, let's see. So committee member Lowe?
Oh, no,
Oh,
we'll
no?
take care of it. I
Oh,
just
you will?
wanted to make-
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, sure.
So,
Yes, present.
wonderful committee member Frederick
Here.
and Chair Farrell.
Here.
We'll note for the record that committee member Sanhu emailed, and so she has an excused absence, and we also have, one vacant spot. And we'll just announce for the record that we have one of our committee members, Gregory Lowe, who participates remotely, and it was properly noticed, so that we can just move forward. We have one member of the public here in person. I don't know if you intend to make a public comment now or you're.
Whatever you do.
Well, what's it in relation to? Something on the agenda or something else? Please, go ahead up. Let's just get your camera.
Welcome.
Hello, and thank you for your time. I'm an Atherton resident.
Would you mind clicking so that it's green? Boom.
Hello, thank you for your time. I'm an Atherton resident and a Tusk patron. Tusk is an organization focused on conservation in Africa. This year, we held our first event in the Western United States here at the Menlo Circus Club. It raised roughly $200,000, enough to field around 250 conservation rangers, which will help protect anywhere between 50 to 1,000 plus animals in Africa for the next coming year. Next year, we will host the same event at the Menlo Circus Club, and it'll be preceded. Our vision is to have it preceded by something called the Tusk Turtle Trail. So each year, Tusk has a trail. Some of the notable trails have been the Gorilla Trail last year and preceded by the Lion Trail. Wonderful opportunities to raise funds. The idea is to display sculptures across the landscape and with artist contributions to the exterior of the exterior. With that said, we're looking for next year to have 6 sculptures in the town of Atherton. These would be turtle sculptures. We would have 2 notable guests to begin with. The first would be Ronnie Wood of the Rolling Stones. The second would be John Cleese of Monty Python, and we have possibly others. So what they would do is they would be on site. They would actually color the sculptures on site as part of the event. Subsequently, before and during and after, the sculptures can be purchased. The final sculpture would be brought to the Menlo Circus Club for the culmination event of Tusk in Silicon Valley. Tusk in Silicon Valley is supported by Prince William. So he officially signs off on our documents, including the event document at the Menlo Circus Club. With that said, we're looking to expand conservation efforts and awareness and funding in the Western United States, specifically in our community and surrounding area. So yes.
Well, first of all, thank you so much. And I believe I read about you and your family. You were on the cover of the Athertonian a couple
Thank you
of.
so much.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that and learning about Tusk. I'm familiar with the organization. And so thank you for all that you do to promote conservation for these incredible mammals. I think it's perfect timing, and I want to open it up to discussion, but it's perfect timing because our theme for Earth Day this year, which was in April, it's an annual event in the town's EPC usually is quite instrumental in providing both guidance, and we've done in the past hands-on for Earth Day. It's biodiversity. And so it couldn't line up better with your objectives. I want to open it up to everyone else, but one of my first questions would be the size of the sculptures and kind of what the process would be to identify the locations. And but I want to open it up to everyone else. I'm sure.
But where are the sculptures? They around Atherton? Where are they?
So it would be roughly around Labor Day weekend, thereabouts. It could be as early as July. I'm here at this point because obviously we have some notable celebrities who would be on site, and of course with Hackney Diamonds last year, Ronnie Wood was in the area, and he's willing to come. He loves the area. So the point being is we need to align who would be present and who would be the artist. So with Ronnie Wood, his one from last year was inspired by a Rolling Stones song, and that gets auctioned off, and the proceeds, of course, go to animal conservation in Africa. As we know, Africa is the second most impacted part of the world, with a 76% decline since 1970. And that is severe in terms of wildlife. So our goal is to, extinction does not have to be does not have to be an outcome. We can save these animals, we could save these environments for future generations to know and experience. So with that said, to your question, the size is roughly around my height, could be smaller. They have a good base, so they're not easy to topple over, have you. And as far as opportunities to display, the two that come to mind are in the adjacent area over here to the town center, where we have one sculpture out there that's affixed, obviously. And also at Holbrook Palmer Park. So there would be 6 sculptures. The idea, what typically happens is a map is created. It's an animated map, so it draws in more interest from younger crowds as well as cartoonish, have you. And it would display like roughly where each of the sculptures are displayed. As far as our opportunity here, it's an opportunity to showcase our community's commitment to conservation efforts at a larger scale, not simply just a local, because if we lose these wonderful, Africa is the last place on earth where you can see the spectrum of life from the smallest animal to the largest in a landscape. Obviously, there are other areas where you can see these in pockets, but in Africa, it's the one place where you could have that continuous experience in many areas, but it is severely being impacted. So that is the inspiration and driving force.
And they're sculptures of what?
These would be sculptures. So the theme this year would be turtles.
So they're sculptures of some kind of a turtle?
Yes. So last year, the sculptures were of gorillas. And the final gorilla that I recall seeing over at the Tusk Conservation Awards with Ronnie Wood was his. But those get auctioned throughout before, during the.
So they're either a modernistic version of a turtle or whatever.
Yeah, so
whatever the
this year,
sculptor
theme
wants to
is
do.
The upcoming year for this 2025, it'll be turtles.
But I mean, and who are the 6 sculptures, or who are the guys who create them?
So there's a artist who actually makes the sculpture, and what I've seen is they all have the same dimensions, but then they have an artist or someone from the artistic general experience to go ahead and paint on top of those. So something that inspires them, that comes to mind. In Ronnie Wood's case, it was one of his songs from the Rolling Stones. So John Gleason, he had a different.
But I mean, I'm confused. Are you saying all the sculptures look the same until they're painted?
Yes, that is correct.
So they're all the same until they're painted. Then they're painted.
And
Okay,
then they invite someone of an artistic background to go ahead and paint them.
correct.
So,
And you're saying 2 would be here,
and this
Could be
this
Atherton?
would be 6 sculptures.
but 2 in Atherton? And
We could have, just hypothetically speaking, we could put 2 on site here and 4 over at Holbrook Palmer Park. We could distribute them elsewhere.
so you're saying 6 on town land,
Yes,
but they could also be at Menlo College.
we could put those there.
Right?
It's not, it would be, I mean, this is early just concept.
Yeah, it could be Menlo
idea.
College or high school or
College, which
whatever.
is a great idea. And it didn't come to my thought that way, but yes, I was thinking but yes, absolutely.
So your event's not till summer. Now, our event, our Earth Day thing is in April. What could you guys do to either promote what you're doing or promote your ideas? Do you have do you table? Do you have signs? Do you have informational
Bring it
banners?
to
We have a lot of that.
Bring it to 'em.
We could definitely work together on this. Again, Prince William was going to plan to come. We had discussed this for a few years about coming to the first one, but now he's the future king, so his time is tapped. But the plan is for him eventually to come out, as well as his son, who has an interest in Tusk. So how the sculptures would get here is one of the Tusk partnerships is with DHL, and so they would just bring them here on site.
That's so amazing. I believe I've seen something similar, but they were cows and they were to Ken's
yeah.
question, they were all the same size, dimensions, and then they were painted by local artists representing different themes, but the cows, and this is in Washington, D.C. So first of all, amazing. Thank you for all the work that you do for conservation. As the mayor said, our event in April could be a wonderful opportunity to start to engage the community about what you're doing. And I don't know if it would be possible if they'd be cast already, if we could have a replica or even
Get a
one
real turtle.
there in April.
No, seriously, get a big real turtle.
The request was for me to come here and start the dialogue.
Mhm.
The details of that, we could work those out. And I think that we could bring one that's already in the UK or elsewhere over. So
But all kidding aside, you'd be better off with a real turtle on a picture.
yes, they're
I
wonderful
mean, people would be
opportunities,
much
and,
more excited about seeing a real turtle,
the two key
right?
points
I mean,
is that,
seriously.
as you know, that with Prince William, his reputation is closely guarded because he's the future king of a nation. Second, the opportunity to leverage all of those involved with Tusk, who would be here on site or be contributing in some capacity, is wonderful to inspire young minds and all minds and people of all walks of life as to the current situation, a 76% decline since 1970 in Africa, and what we could do to save species in Africa and natural places for the coming years. And this is a way to bring awareness and funding to those causes.
Have you ever had a chocolate turtle?
There could be, yes.
No, we know there's a whole candy business of chocolate turtles.
Yeah.
They're actually turtles. We could sell them at Earth Day.
Seriousness. We follow up with you and talk more one-on-one.
Sure,
At the
absolutely.
absolute minimum, I'd love to see you guys table at our event.
Yes.
One of the things we're struggling with,
Aquarium.
what we're going to talk about today, is how do we get this idea across? If you're not giving lectures, how do you get this idea across? And I kept thinking we should have informational posters or visuals or something like
Yeah,
that.
it's not the
So maybe that's
not the
something your organization might have or be interested in, but at minimum, you should table at our event.
Absolutely.
This up.
And as you may know, Tusk has a huge network and experience. I recall I'm going to the Tusk Awards next week, my wife and I, so we'll be there with Prince William and with Ronnie Wood and others. The point being is they're wonderful nominees for awards. And one that I recall his name is Omas Tian. And he talked about how over 25 years, he's taken the turtles in his area of Africa and has brought them back from the brink of extinction. And slowly but surely, and with a little bit of support. And so Tusk acts as an aggregator. It looks for causes like his. And there was also this woman in Southwest Africa who started a rhino refuge to protect them from extinction. And she has now gained support from Tusk, but also her effort has grown. So Tusk looks for all of these grassroots areas, opportunities to engage the local environment in terms of the local community, those that say, listen, this is part of your experience, your heritage, but it's also part of the world's heritage. If we lose this, we lose such a beautiful thing. So that's what we're at the forefront. And the reason why I'm here is because when I look at the end of the Tusk, one of the reasons, I look at at the end of the Tusk Awards, we display how many people have died in the efforts of conservation because we field rangers, and the list keeps on getting longer. So I thought, well, being in Silicon Valley, it seems that we need more technology engagement. And how can we broadcast that? We need events. We need to go to the community. We cannot expect Silicon Valley to come to our events, wherever they may be, London, New York City, the Hamptons, wherever they may be. We need to go to where technology is driven and to start engaging and saying, these are the situations that are happening. And this is an opportunity to showcase that by having some fun at the same time and bringing some celebrities, have you, that can engage the audience interest as well as others who are just looking to learn more about how to get more involved. So yes, long story short, is we can be involved in the Earth Day event. I just need to go. I'm going to London. We're leaving in like 3 days. So next Wednesday, I'll be talking to them in person or even before that.
One of the challenges that we've had with the committee, our mandate is to educate the residents. And one of the challenges we've had is to identify materials that can reach across age groups. And I think conservation is a really important one. Biodiversity, I think it's the twin crisis with the climate crisis. So they go hand in hand. Maybe part of the conversation with your colleagues in London, the Tusk organization, could be, can we leverage some of the existing materials and do a series of events that could be starting around the Earth Month, which is April, leading up to your event in September. But we've brainstormed already doing a movie that could be for a certain age group of our residents. We're very much in touch with the schools, the 2 private schools that sit in Atherton that are under 12th grade, the college that's in Atherton, and the public high school that's in Atherton, and then the elementary schools that are part of those private schools that sit in Atherton. But if we could have leverage materials, because as such a small group, it's hard for us to come up with content. So if there's materials, if there've been, I don't know, interactive games, other things that we can bring to the community, we can leverage, then our wonderful staff, Christabel and Anthony, can work with the interns that we have. We have interns that support them to try to roll out a couple of different programs. I imagine that fundraising is probably on the top of your agenda. And so, and it's important, as you said, to protect the lives of those who are risking their lives, right? To protect these elephants and others. So if you could, when we meet again, kind of give us a better understanding of what you see our role being in supporting that, because obviously we're not fundraisers, but we could facilitate, some sort of educational event where perhaps you also talked about the fact that you're looking to raise funds. But I think that's something we should probably discuss, but I imagine that's probably a very important part of the agenda of the organization. Is that right?
Most definitely. We want to educate the public as far as what opportunities there are to be involved and how can they envision contributing in the future. There also, of course, is the funding aspect as expressed. California has, in the largest scale, California has 3 key areas that can contribute to conservation. In our area, of course, is technology-driven solutions, AI cameras specifically, drones to a lesser degree. In Los Angeles, it's media, making more stories that tell the story of animals and compassion. And I don't see any movies about conservation rangers, for example, but yet so many of them die each year. In San Diego, it's conservation science with the San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance. And having seen that in person, it's wonderful to see that they are making efforts to try to buy time to stop the clock. So 3 parts that we can contribute as a state. Local awareness, most definitely. I wish we had this meeting earlier because at our first event, the founder of Tusk was here, and he's a close friend of mine, but he's also a close friend of Prince William's. And he would have been wonderful to bring to some sort of event. Or as far as Tusk in Silicon Valley, we anchored it in September due to the Menlo Circus Club calendar, and this year for the same reasons, because the annual horse show takes place and prior to that.
Yeah.
But we could possibly look to align it with Earth Day if that makes any sense to have
Wouldn't.
those who would attend that also
Yeah,
contribute
we
in
do that.
some regard, if that makes sense. So we could have those discussions. For our next meeting, I'll recommend that the U.S. Representative for Business Development, who's very much in touch with these other areas, join our session so she could share some of the other details more specifically that as far as this contributions for educational institutions in the town. Yes.
By the way, this morning I heard on the radio that the giraffes are very much threatened as well.
That is absolutely the case. In fact, the Angola giraffe is no longer seen in Angola in the wild. It's only in zoos and other locations that are protecting it. Interesting enough is that zoos are turning into protection sites because we need some sort of fortified place that has some sort of safeguards where poachers don't wander in there in the middle of the night. But ultimately, what we need more technology involvement. Technology can stop extinction in so many ways and could help facilitate greater gains in environments. What I love about Tusk is many things, but the community engagement. So when I spoke to Julie from Madagascar, she talked about how Tusk was involved in building their local library and educating them as far as like, hey, giving them materials as far as the wonderful animals there and how important they are to the larger world, and encouraging people, locals, to draw like on the walls of this institution and this building, and just Tusk does so many good things. But first and foremost, it's at the forefront of protecting wildlife, and we lose rangers every year. So there are a lot of inspiring stories, but as someone who lives in Silicon Valley, I see that there's ample need for some level of awareness. And given that we're here in Atherton, which seems to be ground zero of Silicon Valley in many ways, it just makes sense.
Yeah,
Have you
for
guys
sure.
worked at all with Conservation X? They raise money for conservation technologies. And one of our residents in Atherton, Gary Lauder, is a big investor and founder of Shot Putter, which is a sound. It detects the sound of guns, and they're now using it to find poachers. But what's her name? Maureen
Okiki.
Okiki had given me that name to share with you guys for Earth Day, the Conservation X, and also some a group that does audio recordings. I have it on my phone. I'll pull it up as two things that we might want to look at as things for this year. But Conservation X, I'm going to give you my card, but I want to
Thank you.
follow up with you because that, if you haven't connected with them, that's exactly what they do. They invest in conservation technologies, everything from that shot technology to a whole bunch of things. So I was just looking it up myself the other day, so I'm not well versed on it yet. I just learned about it.
Yes, I don't believe we have. In fact, I'm the only, I'm the only person that's really on the ground here in Silicon Valley. We have a few new patrons, but I'm the one that really has that vision where I said, hey, we need an event in the Western United States, specifically in Silicon Valley, for that three-part solution. First, introduce technology for these types of gains. Second, more films that show the compassionate side of animals and how important they are. And third, stopping the clock by conservation science in San Diego. So California is pivotal for overall success in terms of what can be done.
For sure. Well, as I mentioned about the different groups and the outreach, doing some sort of a mixer for tech and conservation could be a really interesting approach. And we could have it here. We've talked about doing other types of mixers and invite VCs and invite founders. I know there's another group, and the name is escaping me, but I'll have to find it for you, where they do virtual safaris, and the financier is based also from California. But that could be a fun engagement, so you can sign up, and they're out of London, actually, I think. And then you can, if we did it in the evening, tomorrow morning, we could go on safari via drone. And I just remember I spoke with them once, and I think they were early days. But through all of us, I think you'll find a very receptive audience who's, willing to brainstorm on how we can help you and maybe build a comprehensive plan, whether it's fitting into Earth Day with the table to introduce the idea, doing a series of events, culminating with your big event, the fundraiser at the Circus Club. But we're really excited, and please let us know how to reach you, and maybe we can have just a follow-up. How does that work, Anthony, if we want to do it without any violations of?
Depends on what we want. So if we want to just have staff connect with you and invite like a subcommittee member or two members of our committee, no problem, no harm, no foul. If we wanted any more than two of the members of our committee, we would likely need to do it at a publicly noticed meeting.
Okay. He knows all the rules.
Yes.
By the way, when you introduced yourself, I wasn't quite sure. Do you live in Atherton or do you live in the UK?
I live in Atherton. I'm frequently in the UK, so people always think I live in the UK.
Greg, if you come to Halloween next year, him and his family would win the Halloween costume party every year.
I
They've
see.
got the best stuff.
I see. So you go to the UK for work, but you live in Atherton.
For charitable causes, I go to the UK, and also I went to Cambridge University in the UK. So
So what's the website for the
tusk.org.
Tusk.org?
I
Just
can
Tusk.org,
share some
yes.
of that stuff so that
Just
we.
We also have a local website here that we've established for Tusk Bay Area. Tusk. You have the links,
I have
Anthony,
the
right?
You got it all?
Yes.
And also, did you have his business card?
I've got his contact
Yes,
information.
perfect. Lastly, are you only worried about poaching or other things that kill the animals somehow or limit their life, like
Everything.
pollution or everything else? I mean,
Pollution, everything, whether it's deforestation, poachers, of course, that is an acute pain point because they actually kill our conservation rangers. So that is a more notable concern that we have, but our concern spans across the board.
so is deforestation a big issue because it winds up
Yes.
taking away the habitat?
And Jane Goodall's 90th birthday celebration was wonderful. So I had the opportunity to attend that. Thanks to Red, who lives here in Atherton as well. One of the inspirations from Jane was that she said that in her documentaries, as you recall, she had her research done on a specific mountain. Over the years, the areas outside of her research area have been deforested. So when you look at it now, instead of seeing the green landscape, you see her area and everything else is gone, deforested. So essentially, it was only because of her presence and her efforts to bring researchers and the notable documentaries, et cetera, that prevented complete deforestation in that area.
And is the cause for deforestation heating and cooking or something else?
It is sometimes it is limited local means in terms of sometimes sometimes it's driven from the outside, sometimes it's internal. So
I mean, is it mainly people needing to cook and heat themselves, or they selling the wood for lumber?
It's sometimes it deals with local economy issues, but what we're seeing in terms of poaching and those related efforts are external, and they're just unfortunately wreaking a lot of havoc.
Gotcha.
So
Thanks.
that's and ultimately my inspiration was that over the years I've been really following these animals, and I looked at the Western black rhino, which had over 1 million rhino 120 years ago, and as of 14 years ago is now extinct with no possibility of recovery. And it just seems to be so mind-boggling, the level of extinction that is happening. The rate has accelerated over the last 50 years. And I think our community has a lot of wonderful contributions it can make to the world. Geographical location, community members, those who live in the proximity of the community, California as a state. So a lot of wonderful opportunities that we can contribute. So it's a big part of my
So a
inspiration.
technical question. Are turtles in water and terrapins on land?
What was the last?
What's a turtle on land? Is that a terrapin?
Oh, that's,
Is that, I mean, seriously, is that what you call them?
I'm not an expert of zoology to that degree.
But you care about turtles both on land and in the water?
We care about all of them, yes.
Okay, just check.
Well,
By the way, you mentioned Angola. Angola has a lot of deforestation as well.
It does. And that's why these types of efforts really do help. Again, our first event here in Atherton at the Menlo Circus Club raised enough funds to field 250 rangers for next year. And a lot of Tusk's primary objectives are to field rangers because of the acute severity that is occurring as far as poaching, et cetera. But also there are other efforts in terms of community efforts is a big part of Tusk. So it's across the board, across the continent of Africa. Yes.
And you say this business development lady will be out here sometime? The marketing?
Oh,
business
yes.
development?
Her name is Bernadette. So I will bring her to the next
And
session.
she's in
She's
DC?
located here in Los Angeles and in DC. But she asked me to be present and to start this dialogue. So
Perfect.
that's why.
Yeah, thanks.
Can I propose that staff take up the next steps to connect with you and then
Yes.
maybe engage a subcommittee so that we can talk more logistics and even at some point provide the committee with details about their organization so that we can all be up to speed on that?
Sounds great.
I'm sorry, I'm in a meeting right now.
and if you
Can you tell
if you can provide all those details, we can also start thinking about what the integration with our existing plans for Earth Day might look like. And staff is taking the lead on organizing Earth Day this year, but we can certainly brainstorm different events that we could do for our community to educate them, from the students at the schools, Menlo College, retirees, et cetera. So bringing everyone to the table, I think, could be helpful on the education side, and then we can speak separately about the fundraising.
Most definitely. I want to thank you all for your time today.
Thank
and
you.
I will be in
Thank you.
touch with
Yeah.
Anthony as far as additional details.
Yeah. love
But I
to do
believe some initial details provided, but I will
Yeah, I
provide
can-
more.
that. Yeah.
Thanks for all the work you do.
Thank you.
Thank
for
you.
everything, for
See
your
you.
time. Thank you.
All right.
So I'll conclude at this point. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. So our first item on the agenda. I'll just share this. We can just move. First item is what, minutes? Is that right? All right. Has the committee had an opportunity to review the minutes? Are there any edits, notes?
No,
Questions, comments,
Seeing
concerns?
none, if we can get a motion.
I move we accept the minutes.
I second the motion.
Awesome. And we'll just do a quick little roll call, add that element in. Committee member Lowe, let me unmute him. Committee member Lowe, can you unmute? Let's just move forward. Do you guys, I got two ayes over here for approval of the minutes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Aye.
Next up, we've got item 2, Reach Code ordinance updates and discussion. And so Christabel will take a lead there.
Yes, hello. I am bringing you today an introduction of what is going to go to the city council next month, proposing an electric readiness ordinance, also called the Reach Codes. In the staff report, I elaborate in detail, but I'll quickly go through it. Our ask of you today is to review the drafted ordinance that's going to go to the city council next month and provide any recommendations or input you might have for consideration of the draft. In addition to that, I'm hoping that the EPC can also discuss strategies for how to engage residents, contractors, and developers of these proposed amendments if and when they take place. I know planning events and educational workshops around these can take time. So I wanted to bring it up now that we are drafting this Reach Code ordinance that's moving for an official first reading next month, because following that, we're going to want to engage with the community, let them know about the updates that are coming, especially our developers and contractors. So ways that we can engage, educate, and help facilitate this transition would be really helpful from the EPC. With that, I can provide a little bit of background for the Reach Codes and a little bit of the discussion that was had from the council. And then we can go through the ordinance together and see if we have any comments, questions,
So
or
you're expecting at this session, we'll provide you all the background to go back to the council?
We
is that
don't
what
have
you're
an
saying?
expectation of that. We're providing an opportunity for the committee to be a part of the discussion.
But
yes.
this is our one shot.
You will have another opportunity if you want to send Christabel an email. If you want to email me, you have more opportunities to have public engagement as a committee member or.
But as a
resident.
committee, this is the one shot.
Yeah.
We can bring it back if we want. If you guys want to call a special meeting and
Okay.
have more of a discussion collectively, or if you want to provide that type of.
And
information.
when's the presentation to the? for the-
December 18th.
Okay.
Yeah. So to your direct question, Ken, yes, this is your opportunity to provide feedback on the first draft. Scheduling for the city council meeting and the second reading will be up to the agenda and what's in line and in queue right now. So when the opportunity for another chance to provide feedback, it might be a quick turnaround. So at that point, staff might recommend that you attend the city council meetings and provide input via public comment that way. It'll just depend on the scheduling. And to that, I can't really speak, but we do have a first reading going next month.
But it doesn't get adopted and enacted until the second reading, which wouldn't take place until January of 2025. So now being November 21st, we're talking 2 months down the line before the council would actually vote and adopt.
So if I wanted to make a formal proposal for a statement to the city council as to the Reach Code, where we vote on it, I can't do it. I can bring it up for discussion now. We'd have to vote on it somewhere, some other time, right?
Let me make sure I understand your question. So the process is that the first introduction will happen in December for the council. They've already went through the Reach Codes multiple times, which were publicly noticed meetings that
After them,
anybody
yes,
could have
I
been
did,
part of, right? At that time, they'll continue to provide more direction to staff, Christabel,
Yeah, yeah.
myself, George, about how they'd like to see it implemented, if there's any updates,
Yep.
changes. Residents can make comments at that time, provide input at that time.
Yep.
It will then come back to the city council with potential amendments, changes, revisions
Sure.
for formal adoption in January, like January, I don't know, 19th, 20th, whatever the third Wednesday in January. will be.
Yeah.
And at that time, we really can't make any substantive changes unless, and if we do, then we would have to postpone the formal adoption. So if your objective is, I only want to make a comment when the council's going to vote to adopt this, it would be at that January meeting.
No, I wasn't being clear. Sorry. What I'm saying is, you just might imagine this. I've got a slightly different view on the Reach Codes. And I'd like to propose that the EPC think about that and consider that as our position.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part. A slight, you said you have what?
I've got a different view as to what the Reach Code should do
Okay,
and how they should be enforced.
sure.
And I'd like to make that as a proposal to the EPC to consider as their recommendation back to the council.
So let me just interject here. The role of the EPC is just to provide guidance, correct?
Correct.
Certainly.
And there could be different opinions.
There
which
could be.
There are. My opinion differs from Ken's. So, and I haven't heard Greg's. So is there a way to facilitate contribution from each of the individual members of the EPC to council? That might be the most effective, because I think we're coming at it from slightly different places. And is there a precedent? Did that happen before with the?
Sure. Park items there, and the process would likely be for you to provide that input now or through public comment or an information exchange directly with staff. And staff can certainly provide that information to the council during our presentation.
Okay.
We can do that, but you as a resident and a committee member can also attend those meetings and say, these comments are me as a resident. If we want to make a comment as the Environmental Programs Committee, then yeah, we would have to have some type of consensus or formal vote. If there's like, hey, there's 4 of us, we want to make an Environmental Programs Committee recommendation, and you don't agree on that, then there wouldn't be a recommendation.
Got it.
Right?
Okay.
So
But you can report back saying.
we can report
it
back
was
and
split
say, the
this way,
Environmental
right?
Programs Committee discussed this topic. There were a few different perspectives. Typically, the town doesn't say committee member X feels this way, because you're never going to do that well. You're going to say, we had a discussion and these were some of the areas that our committee members either raised concerns on, provided support on, and there was no formal consensus, but this was a
exactly.
part of that discussion. And then if one of those committee members attends that meeting in person, they can speak on their own behalf as well.
You can also write a letter, right?
They can also write a letter in advance. You can write that letter today. You can write that letter.
But if
months
we put it in, if I give you something in writing, you can put it into our minutes.
Well, it's impossible for me to speed read this stuff. So I will have to, I will need a few days to read it, or you'll have to send it to me and then I can read it at home.
Sure. And yeah, so the written comments, so they don't go into the minutes. We don't attach written comments as a part of, but it is available for the permanent record. So if you send a written comment as a public comment to the city council,
Public, as a member of the EPC, I'd like to
you
have the
can't send a
council.
comment to the city council as a member of the EPC unless you're authorized by the EPC to speak on behalf of the full committee.
But in the minutes of the EPC, you can document.
I would feel
disagree.
more comfortable if I could just send it to the committee and then you guys can decide whether you think it's worthwhile or not.
That's fine as well.
Can I ask too, when this discussion was taking place about the leaf blowing, and I know this was before I joined the EPC, was there, Mayor, EPC recommendation for the leaf blower ordinance?
I believe there was.
There was,
And
Yeah.
think, just so you know, historically, whenever we have these meetings, the EPC would attend and do public comment.
right.
And they would not only attend, but they would get other members of the public to make comments as well.
Okay, good
That's
to
true.
know. I think we should
You mean
go
at this
through,
meeting or at the council meeting?
At the
The
At the
council
council
meeting.
meeting.
I think we should let Christabel go through everything so
agree.
Gregory can also hear it. And
Okay, that's fine.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't want to make any recommendation without without Sunit, Gregory, myself having the chance to read through everything. I
Yep.
don't think that.
I agree. Yeah.
Can I ask a question just to clarify something? But I'm very sorry that last time, the meeting in September, I missed it, but I didn't get any notification. And I don't, or maybe I did, and I didn't recognize that Christabel was sent it to me because I didn't know that she was new on the committee. But are you parallel, or how do you relate to Anthony's mail? Because I used to get the invitations through Anthony. So Christabel, what is your role exactly?
She's Rachel's replacement.
Oh,
It's a-
I see.
There
Okay,
you go.
I'm sorry. Very good, very good. That clarifies it.
But you should say what your real title is. I
Yeah.
just was making a shortcut because I knew what he would think.
Yeah.
Please.
For you, Greg, yeah, Rachel Launder was my predecessor. So I'm currently the management analyst in the city manager's office and
Oh,
the
very
staff
good.
liaison to the EP.
Excellent. So should we expect the invitation to this meeting to come from you or from Anthony?
I would say either or are reliable options. Most likely it's going to be for me, but there may be times where it's Anthony or I that's sending
Okay, very good, very good. So I'll be looking for either name.
Okay, perfect. All right, with that, I will read through my staff report. So feel free to have it read along if you're with me, or if you have it with you. If not, we could probably put it on the screen. So just as a refresher for you, the town adopted the 2022 Cal Green Code as outlined in our current Chapter 15.19 of the Atherton Municipal Code. And that is essentially the Green Building Code. There's a section in it that talks about REACH codes or building electrification. And that's a section that we're looking at today specifically for new construction and for existing buildings, specifically alterations and I'm blanking on the other word, alterations and renovations. So since the adoption of this Cal Green Code, there was a situation with the restaurants versus the state of California. And we had to redact our previous REACH code and adopt the state's code. And with that, the city council is now looking at the enhancements to our REACH code and explored two different approaches. On page 2, we'll go through those two approaches. In February of this year, the city council revisited the REACH code conversation, and they were presented with two major approaches. The first one was the energy performance approach, and this option focused on decarbonizing buildings by regulatory energy performance under the energy code, while still allowing the use of natural gas appliances. It was designed in response to the California Restaurant Association versus City of Berkeley ruling. The second approach that they were presented was the electric readiness measure. This approach requires the installation of electrical infrastructure, but does not mandate the immediate switch to electric appliances. It prepares buildings for future electrification at the most cost-effective stages during new construction or significant renovations.
Can we take a pause?
Yes.
Can we just provide a little clarification around significant renovations? This is one of the areas that the city council has been thinking through on how that gets applied here locally. And we're taking some direction from our partners in how we apply that. We don't yet have it fully mapped out. So please don't ask us any questions about that, because a significant renovation could be somebody's redoing a kitchen versus somebody's changing a bunch of different utility closets, right? And so we're deciding, well, should it be triggered based on a square footage? Should it be triggered based on the cost of the renovation? Should it be triggered on some other mechanism or a combination of those? So again, we're trying to introduce some of these things to you. We're not looking for you to help us rewrite an ordinance, provide specific language for the ordinance. It's mostly to educate and inform. And then if you have any input on how we might engage residents on what's to come, we'd love to hear that. So,
When you say partners, who are the partners you're talking about?
the county consultants, those partners who are helping design the model ordinance.
And they are who?
PCE, Silicon
Peninsula
Valley.
Clean Energy, Silicon Valley, Clean Energy, was it
Clean
Coalition?
Power or something? Energy.
TRC and the Office of Sustainability from the county. There's a variety of different partners working on this.
Mhm. All right. So although the council explored the energy performance approach, number one, they did raise concerns about the complexities and timelines associated with it, because this approach requires California Energy Commission approval. And this process can take several months. So we found that the 2025 Energy Code will increase prescriptive requirements, rendering the point-based approach less applicable for single-family buildings in town. So for that reason, staff didn't recommend pursuing the energy performance approach and instead wanted to focus on the electric readiness requirements.
Do you guys have any questions on that energy performance approach? Hopefully you don't, because it's complicated, but if you have any questions or you're unclear about it, we can give you a very, very general
And I sat through the
understanding about.
presentations and it's very complicated.
Right. So if you do.
No,
now
I
would be the
have
ti-
a question about what is the meaning of readiness?
Readiness would be installing electrical outlets where you might have a gas appliance, but making it available for the future modification. So if you are going to put in a stove and you're going to have a gas stove, also simultaneously installing the proper electrical outlets to allow for somebody to have an electric cooktop, or the same type of work for a hot water heater versus, something else.
And
So
I
that's what
remember
readiness is.
when the council went through Plan B, the electric readiness measure, there was quite a lot of discussion around some specifics, like when it came to barbecues and pool houses. In the end, was it flushed out which items would be ruled out?
It was.
Okay.
Yeah, the council provided direction on that. I'll let Christabel,
Okay.
move forward, but they did.
Readiness really means availability instead of implementation.
Correct.
It's having the space electric ready without actually having electric appliances.
Yes, yes. And you can do that for water heaters as well?
Yes.
Okay.
So as mentioned, staff recommended the electric readiness approach because this can be adopted quickly without the CEC approval, and it's more cost effective. Through this approach, we note that we're not what was that?
Cost effective mean when you say cost effective?
It means we are doing this at the earliest stages of construction or renovation, which are also the least cost because you're already tearing down a wall or building from the ground up, versus when the Bay Area Air Quality Management District
Yeah.
has their new rules mandating carbon net zero appliances, that we are already electric ready.
But in theory, you'll get some, at least from the building roundtable or somewhere, you get some insights into, even though it's cost effective compared to everything else, it's still costly.
Yes, essentially because you're already undergoing a new construction
Yeah, but
or
it's
a
still
renovation.
costly to do it.
Yes.
And again, just a point of clarification, the staff in the city, we're not looking to help people. We're not going to design an ordinance around the cost of remodeling a home, or that's not the intent here. But obviously taking those things into consideration are a part of it. And so I think the council has definitely taken a stance where, well, we don't want somebody who's pulling in a permit to replace one item to have to then tear a wall down, because that wouldn't be cost effective.
If they had to.
So we don't want to design an ordinance that would trigger that type of outcome, right? You pull an electrical permit to replace one item that went bad, or you do want to replace because you're trying to be, conscious about your contribution toward the environment. And now you've got to rewire your whole kitchen.
Yeah, we
So the
understand.
goal is to be mindful for all new construction.
Yes.
They're building from the ground up most of the time anyway.
It's not going to cost
We
them
have
that much more.
Put a definition around remodel yet. We're
Right.
waiting on that. So this is really for the majority of homes that are built in Atherton are these very large homes that already have big budgets.
Right.
So this would be a very small line item
Yes.
compared to the overall cost. I don't know what the percentage is, but I think it's less than 5%.
Right. And I believe that the new building standards for 2025 already require electric ready.
Okay.
So, that is not part of a reach code. That's going to be a
Devil is in the
standardized.
detail, because what is electric ready to one person is not electric ready to the other person.
That is,
Having
I
sat
think,
through those
well
discussions.
defined. I think that's already defined though in those building codes.
Well, maybe in the new one, I'm saying the 2025s have to be.
Yeah.
So if all we do is adopt that, that's one thing. I don't know what they are. But the discussion I heard, and I heard from the builders, was it's a different story whether you have the outlet exactly right there beside where the water heater is versus have it coming into the house somewhere else. Those costs are totally different.
They could be, and I just want to be very clear, that's not our.
So
part
you
of
don't
this
care.
process.
You do not care what it costs. Is what you're saying? I mean, just checking.
Did I say that?
You don't, that's what you just said.
No.
No.
It's not the focus of the ordinance.
Bit of the ordinance. The
Right.
ordinance is exactly how it's labeled, electric readiness measure. However,
That's the detail.
readiness in this case means availability of electric capability without the appliance, just to make sure we're really clear. So in the nature, considering we have a lot to get through, Ken,
Yeah,
if
I
you don't
understand.
mind, can we keep going
All I'm
with
saying is, no,
Christabel?
be very clear. This is a very, very, very important point. people in the construction business at that meeting, their question was, it's one thing to have the availability of electricity to the house.
Yeah.
It's another thing to have it actually wired the box right behind where you be. That's a different cost. And that should be understood.
And those were some of the concerns brought up at the council meeting when we were reviewing the original draft for the consultants to consider when updating this draft. And I'm going to assume that those comments are going to come again at next month's meeting.
Exactly.
And we
I'm
are
not
bringing
sure.
this to the roundtable again for further input in their December roundtable meeting.
The
So,
Builders Roundtable?
correct.
So they have a chance to comment, the
Absolutely.
actual builders.
Absolutely.
Who I
In
think
addition
are-
to the
don't care.
fact that the local builders are, players that we're all familiar with, have, access to staff to,
How many builders show up at the Builders Roundtable?
I would say 5 that I'm familiar with, if I could name.
I've
5
been there twice. I've
independent
seen
builders.
most 3.
But they're all invited and
Yeah,
they,
I understand. Yeah.
No, I could name 5 different builders that I know.
Remember,
that
the
are
builder
regular
doesn't pay the bill, the homeowner does. So the builders don't really care. I'm just telling you. I
all
mean,
right, let's just,
I'm just telling you the truth.
it's already
you to hear
2
it.
o'clock, so can we just let
Okay.
Christabel continue before we?
Yes. So again, to the electric readiness ordinance, this ordinance aims to prepare all new residential buildings and certain major alterations or large major alterations for future electric appliance installations, such as heat pumps, electric water heaters, cooktops, and clothes dryers. These amendments would broaden electric readiness requirements to apply to a wider range of projects beyond expansions, specifically all additions and alterations requiring an electrical permit. And this was a discussion had by the council as well, and amended in this draft ordinance. So by adjusting this section, we capture these projects and the ordinance ensures that homes undergoing significant renovations, such as kitchens, laundry rooms, or utility spaces, are equipped with the necessary electrical infrastructure for future electrification. This incremental approach is both financially feasible and minimizes the burden for homeowners, as it encourages readiness at the point of renovation without mandating immediate appliance replacements. And I think this point gets to Committee Member Frederick's point about the cost. That is a concern that was brought up by the council to our consultants. I'm not sure what they're going to bring back to the council next month in terms of cost, because as mentioned, we don't necessarily dive into the fiscal impact of these legislations because they're going to happen at a regional and statewide level in the coming years. And so this ordinance is to help our residents become electric ready so that at the time of the 2027 and 2029 mandates come, we are already implementing these changes, specifically for our existing buildings, because our new construction was fully supported for the electric readiness.
And we know what those mandates will be.
Yes, and I don't have them at the top of my head, but I believe we will probably remind the council at next
When
month's
you
meeting.
send that to us so we know what they
Yeah.
are.
And maybe just to Ken's point, would it be possible to have the consultants give it any sort of financial breakdown or guidance of what this could cost a homeowner if they didn't do it versus running those lines and preparing the boxes?
They did that to a small degree at the last city council meeting, and like labor and things like that. But, in my experience, they often steer clear of that because it's not something you're going to bake into the ordinance. You're not going to set that because labor costs change, material costs change. So like, that's even one of the reasons where we've had discussions about, well, should that trigger for a renovation be a price point? It's like you put it in 2024 and maybe you add an escalator of CPI and you say, well, in Atherton, like one of our council members, like $50,000 there's no renovation.
Yeah, you can't do that,
Right.
yeah.
So, but they did provide some information, but I'm telling you, it was so far off from what the folks who are at the table who've done probably projects like that in town were like, if this is what you're going to put out, let's just leave it out. I think the number honestly was $3,000. And what are you going to,
That's a good question. Do
Yeah.
you remember before when all the sustainability people did all those very in-depth analysis of all the, because they couldn't recommend a thing to be a green code unless it passed the price stuff that he's talking about. And they did all the studies on all the different things. And this
The
was a
different like
couple years.
pieces of equipment.
I'm wondering if they've done it also on electricity, but I'm trying to remember who the group is, because if we remember who they were,
I know what you're talking about. I probably can
sent
find
it
it.
to us, and it
Yeah.
was a whole, Ken, you'd love it. It's right up your alley. They, in order to recommend something, they had to prove that it was economically feasible. And they did a whole analysis for an average house and what it costs to do with a heat pump versus not, and all of that. And I'm
Which is
sure
why
they
like
did it for
pool
electric
heaters didn't come up because there wasn't a technology that was really rated
at the time.
proficient. Yeah.
But that, we heard all that a few years ago, so
I-
I'm
I
wondering who
think
they
it was,
were.
I think it was PCE and that did it, or maybe it was Farhad.
Or
um,
T something?
I don't know if it was
TP?
TRC. I don't know if it was TRC. But I do remember that. And I think we can pull at least what they presented at that time up and look into anything has
It'd be
been.
interesting if part of that pertained to electric. So when these questions come up either by the EPC or the council, we
Mhm.
can say, oh, by the way,
And we're talking more like if the town moves forward with an ordinance that requires residents to take some of these steps, do we want to have suggestions on equipment or potential costs related to what it might, if you're going to do this, this is what you might be looking at. And here's a list of types of equipment that, have received the proper approval. Is that what we're talking about?
No, I was actually thinking more to the mayor's point, which is just providing background to the council. So if public comment comes up and the council's struggling with making a decision because now there's concerns about costs associated with boxes. So I don't know, you have to put in 50 more boxes, let's say, in one of these large homes. What's the incremental cost there? I just thought if they could answer that, if it's 3,000 a box and we're talking, 50 boxes, that's still pretty small labor outside of that. So I don't know how much information the council needs. I just remember in that last meeting, there was quite a lot of discussion around the smaller items like the barbecues and whether or not you make it.
No, it's a good point, and it's certainly come up. How unintended consequences of moving forward with the REACH code, right? What our residents might be subjected to, because it's different to remodel a 1,200 square foot home over a 7,500 square foot home, even if you are well-intentioned. So I think it's a good point, and we can certainly discuss internally how to maybe best provide that type of guidance or information without, and to Ken's point, not being the experts on it. Like we're not developers and we're not builders.
This is my last comment on this. What I heard from Carol was there's the detail, the devil's in the detail of electrical ready.
Mhm.
If you bring the power to a box at the house,
Mhm.
it's one price. If you wire every location,
Right.
it's another price.
I don't disagree.
And so the question is, what
What does that look
What is-
like?
yeah.
Yeah. So if you have to you're going to do your washroom because you want to bring in some washer and dryer that are electric ready. Okay. Now am I replacing everything on the other side of the building?
but that's beyond us,
yeah. Right. And that's,
about that.
And
I
we did-
remember what we said. Didn't we say it was only if you touched the socket?
And
That
that's-
was that
that's-
specific socket?
that's how we're trying
This
to
came-
design
The
it.
stove, right? In the
Exactly.
remodel.
Or if you're going to replace the lighting
Yeah.
underneath your cabinets, does it mean now I've got to tear all the walls down
Yeah.
to do the wiring throughout the kitchen?
I'm
And-
sorry, I am going to make one more comment, like Columbo.
Well, we know that your
That
last
is-
comment is never a last comment.
And that is that you be doing your residents, who are your customers in this case,
Yes.
and by the way, also your boss, a favor by not having them read 2,000 pages, having it available, but also having a very concise summary of what this really means.
I don't disagree, which is what staff reports are for and presentations and
Okay.
slideshows. But if the devil's in the details, we have to
No, I
also
understand.
provide that, right? But again, to your point,
But they know which details to go to then.
yeah, and all that work is certainly,
Yeah.
know,
No, it's
looking
tough.
forward.
One on those, on Carol's point, for each of those, do you have to have a separate permit pulled and paid? Or is there one permit associated with electrification for the entire home?
Christabel's more
Yeah.
proficient here, but I can provide an overview.
There are electrical permits for specific scopes of work. So one could pull an electrical permit to renovate their utility room. They could pull a separate electrical permit to do a separate building, like a guest house or a garage. But they could do one electrical permit for the same scope of work running through the kitchen, the utility room, and the large part of the renovation for the main house. So it depends on the scope of work essentially. And all of it has to be related to each other.
Understood. I'm just thinking, is it possible, and I really don't know this area, to have one permit with an extended period of time that could apply to these different electrical?
Electric ready
Yeah,
requirement. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I think the building department would know more about that.
okay. I was just thinking from pulling permits, let's say as part of let's say the ordinance moved forward as part of the electrification readiness, you were going to start with your guest house and finish that first, and then you were going to move over to your kitchen. Does it mean that each time you have to pull another permit for that electrification readiness, or?
Well, that's really up to the builder or the homeowner, because when they submit their plans for new construction, for example, they often will have a full scale project that shows the electrical of it, but they might say, hey, we're only looking to do this area now, because permits also have timelines that they have to finish by.
Okay.
So there's times where they don't ask for all of them at once
Because they
they're
can't
not
get it
gonna
done.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so they may come back to pull permits for different electrical work at different times.
Okay. Well, that could also be an opportunity where there's some sort of a handout.
Education and outreach, yeah.
Education, yeah. All right. I understand what Ken's saying about the customer, the town residents, and making sure they have that information, but in an easily digestible way.
I agree.
These things are already coming in, whatever, 2-3 years. But I also feel strongly that Atherton has an opportunity to be leaders in this area. And if other towns look to what we've done, other towns of our, similar size and lots of land in terms of the size of the lots and size of the homes, there could be some good learnings for them. So I think we have an opportunity to be sustainability leaders here. But at the same time, wanting to make sure that residents had all that information and that they weren't unintentionally hit with double or triple costs that just were kind of fallouts from not thinking through the details. But that's what the consultant's for, I'm assuming.
And the champions you have on council, who I will tell you during that last conversation certainly had that exact perspective in mind, maybe some more than others, because they've either been through these projects or they've been talking to their constituents, and they understand that that's a real concern for someone. I mean, if I were doing something similar in my own home, I'd say, well, okay, 20,000 is much different than 100,000, no matter where I'm at, right? So, I will tell you that the council is thinking through that, and they're helping staff make sure that that's a part of the process that we're evaluating before it comes forward. And that's why they have the opportunity to say, you know what, no, come back. No, this isn't going to work. We don't want to adopt it as is. And they've done that.
Thank you. I did want to touch base on close out some thoughts on a few things that we talked about today before moving on. Really quickly on the cost breakdown, I took a note of that to be presented at the next city council meeting if we can have it, essentially just to help inform. We essentially couldn't put costs into an ordinance, but what we could do and what the council considered at the last meeting is capping the requirement at a cost threshold of X amount. So if someone is renovating at X amount, then and it's not a significant renovation, then they would be exempt from these categories. That's the only way we could tie any cost policy to the ordinance, is putting a cost threshold or a cost limit where then it could be exempt for a resident. But other than that, the cost breakdown would essentially just help inform the decision.
But I do think that's relevant, because for older homes where there was a renovation, let's say to a kitchen, and it was within scope, that home might need, and again, this isn't my area, but significant changes to their electrical capabilities.
They would even without the REACH code if they're bringing it up to current building standards.
Correct. So just kind of keeping in mind, would homes that are already kind of coming up to, current standings, would they be out of scope for some of the other costs, or I'm not sure how you think about that versus new building. So if a home was built in 1940 and they're going to do a kitchen renovation, Anthony, what would that look like?
In terms of total cost,
In terms of costs that would be on top with the
on
electric?
top of the REACH code.
Yeah.
So that's a great question. And kind of while we're having this discussion, I think it might be an opportunity for us to go back, talk to our consultants and talk to staff to say, well, should we put forward, this is what I've just been kind of thinking, should we put forward a few scenarios like we did with the housing element, for example, with regard to, okay, this is one type of building that we can look at, and this is how it fits in the building envelope. So should we take a similar approach where we say, here's scenario one. We provide a bit of a scale of a home remodel, right? And we'll look at new construction. So this home's going to get demoed and we're going to remodel it, and it's going to go from, 5,000 square feet to 7,500 square feet, go from single family 1 level to single family 2 level. And what would that look like without REACH code? What would it look like with REACH code? We could think about how to incorporate something like that. I think it's worth the mental exercise. Will we get there? I don't know. We'll probably have to engage our builders and maybe our building department to help us with that. But if that's what you're thinking about, to at least educate and inform the council, I think that's worth a thought exercise.
I do think, because if you're just visually
Mhm.
walking around town and you see a home that was brought down to the ground and a new massive mega home being
Yeah.
built, that's one scenario.
Right.
But if you have a home where it was built in the 50s and people have lived there for 50 years,
Right. And their kids inherit it and they're just going to add a bedroom and change a kitchen.
exactly, just going to change the kitchen. I think that's a really different scenario.
Right.
So we might not see that because we don't see 6 trucks parked outside and all the other stuff. So, I think visually, most of us are accustomed to seeing the mega homes, but these other projects could be taking place. And so the other thing that could be really interesting, and I think the building group would know this, is, what percent of these mega homes are the construction that fall within the threshold, and what percent every year are these smaller renovations. So if people pull permits, 40% of them are for the smaller renovations that are kitchens or what have you, and only 20% are the mega homes. I do think that's kind of good to know. I would like to know that.
I think that's data we can provide to the council, and even if we make a note of that, but we can probably get that information for you guys within the next week or so from the building department. And we can look at, I don't know, a date range of the last 2 years, the last 48 months, and say, yeah, new construction versus, and I would have to look at how they code
So is
it.
it possible to get that or no?
I actually have it.
Okay.
I can pull it up.
Yeah.
So when I was working with our consultants to draft this, I was sharing some of our permit data for the past 2 years. And one of them was our electrical permits. So anyway, I can, let me join the meeting.
I want to make sure that we have time for some items.
Next items like Earth Day and stuff.
So she's come up on your screens in front of us.
Okay, so this is just for your reference. What I sent our consultant down here were our new construction permits for the past 2 years, our alterations for the past 2 years. Sorry, new construction, by the way, we've had permits pulled. 691 permits related to new construction in the past 2 years.
That's over what time?
You said 48 months, the last 48 months.
48 months?
Yeah, so 2 years, but yeah,
Mm-hmm.
from probably the day you asked.
Yeah, so yeah, from January 1st of 2022 and 2023. or sorry, 2023 and 2024, I have permit data for. And this sheet here is new construction for different types of buildings. So if you look at column C, it's new construction of an ADU, new construction of a new accessory structure, new construction of a garage, and there's different other categories and sizes. Another one was alterations. In the past 2 years, we've had about 346 permits pulled for alterations.
Just to be clear, these permits don't necessarily mean they were finalized and they got certificates of occupancy. Some of these projects, they could have pulled them and never started the project, pulled them and still be working. Just
Yeah, and you can see the status in column E. For demos, we've had about 100 permit demos pulled in the past 2 years. And then specifically for our topic here is electrical permits. We've had about 379 electrical permits pulled in the past 2 years. And we can take a look at some of the descriptions too. I see some for EV chargers, car chargers, power walls, utilities for future generators, more power walls, underground service, panels, transfer switches, and so on. So as you can see here, the amount or the count for these, it's not categorized in the building department. So same thing with alterations. If we look at alterations, you'll see, for example, line 29, the building department will put a description of addition, alteration, pool house, and then the square footage that's being adjusted. That could be 100, it could be 578, it could be 1,200. So there's no way to categorize it by size, only by type.
Is it possible to sort column E just to see what was finalized for the last 2 years?
Yes.
So again, this was 2022, 2023, and then whatever you had up for mid 2024. So 2.5 years, basically.
Correct.
I think if you go to data and
Where are
then
we? Where are we?
Are you trying to get the idea of how many
finalized, yeah.
Where-
How many
Okay.
these rules would apply to? Is that what you're trying to find out right now?
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to find out, and it kind of comes back to what Ken was asking, you know, how many of these are for large new construction projects, and how many are for the smaller remodels, just so we have a sense of who would be impacted, financially impacted. If we say, you know, 50% of them are the smaller ones, and we know that these homeowners aren't, they're not, you know, spec homes, they're not the mega homes, they're our residents who've, you know, lived here for many years and now are being impacted. I'm just curious to know.
But the background of why they're even doing this is that the state is going to make some of the devices like illegal. You won't be able to buy them anymore. So picture the little old lady whose water heater breaks. If she's going in and touching her utility closet, we're saying make it ready because in a few years she's going to have to switch over. So the goal here is to kind of get it so that people are ready for the transition when it comes, because it's coming.
Understood, but when she switches over, it's when it breaks. It's not
Right.
like you have to automatically switch it
And
over.
our code wouldn't require them to switch it over now.
Right.
No.
It would be
just
end of
gets
life.
Ready. So when you're pulling wires, remember this discussion we were talking about when you pull the wires? That's when it's cost effective to do now. If you're pulling wires for something else or you pull electric
Right, like
permit,
new construction.
now you
Yep.
add the capability. You don't have to put the thing, but you add the capability.
Yep.
So now when your thing breaks, you've got at least what you're still going to have to do, finish it, but you've got the wires pulled. There was a big discussion.
It was,
remember?
and so from like, for a layman like myself, you're pulling the wire at the new construction. So you just make sure that not only the wire has the right capacity, but and Ken, I think you're like an engineer by trade. You're playing like you're not, but you know, like the 240 volt outlet versus the 120. The 240 is going to be needed for that stove,
Yeah.
but the 120 is like your charger for your cell phone. So like behind my stove right now, it doesn't have a 240. So if I wanted to get an electric
Yeah.
cooktop, I'd have to pull new wire
Right.
and have that outlet upgraded to meet that capacity, which
Okay.
means opening the wall and
Maybe,
We're trying to
maybe,
catch
maybe
it
not.
at the time that you're opening the wall before
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Save the person money and make
Yeah,
everybody
yeah,
ready, so it
Yeah.
goes. Because
I hear
you'd
that,
be
yeah,
bummed if you're
yeah,
the one
yeah.
who does it,
right.
you know,
Yeah,
2 months
yeah,
before, and then all of a sudden you now have to do it
Yeah.
again.
No,
So-
that,
Unless
that
Wolf
makes
Range
sense.
has an electric.
But you're
cooktop.
assuming that the state is going to do that and not allow any of the mitigation that we're trying to do now.
They've announced the dates. They're
I
all not
understand
off the
that.
Top of my head, but they announced when they will no longer sell some of the devices is
I-
on
no,
the
I-
map. It's
In addition to the fact that that also aligns with the town's climate action plan.
Yeah.
And it aligns with the state's goals for
Yeah, I got all
carbon
that,
net
yeah.
zero. Yeah,
Well, I think this could be interesting. You could have the consultants
it's
put it.
201, by the way.
201. So they could easily have a slide or two just to show over the last 2 years for council.
I think it's a good
You
idea.
know, like these were the new constructions that were finalized. I
For
wouldn't, I
perspective.
probably wouldn't do the permits pulled, right? Because they didn't finish it.
That's a good point. I mean, we could just have the data ready, but yeah, I think final makes more sense because it's a better key indicator
Mhm.
about what work was started and actually finished. So yeah.
And they could easily put it into a pie chart and you could see how many were bathrooms, how many were Tesla walls and like what have you. And then that way the council would see where this activity is taking place
Sure.
and therefore who's going to be most impacted.
Yeah, we could give them, they can put a little pivot table, right? And
Okay. Or
EV
even just some
chargers versus,
pie
yeah.
charts.
So just to clarify, we would like to see like permit trends for the past few years.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank
Don't you think, Ken?
Yeah, again, I go back, I know I said, wouldn't say it again. The devil is in the detail because, again, go back to Carol's question, it's like, do you take the 240 volts in your case directly to the back of the gas water heater that you're putting in? Or do you put it at the entrance to the utility area, or do you take it, you know what I mean? It's the devil's in the detail how far you go. You
Right.
clearly should, no question,
Right.
take 240 volts to the house. The question is how close to the end item and what's the cost?
Yeah.
And,
mean, for
and once
me,
you
it's-
get to the house, the costs are not as bad.
Right. And for me, it's, well, how much more can I sell this place for if I do all of that?
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Oh, not much more. Well, then let the new owner deal with that. Why am I doing it?
But
yeah,
any- so my thought process here was just having been in that last council meeting where there was a lot of questions, can we give them a picture of what's happened in our town for the last 2 years in terms of these permits and completed projects? I do think it's interesting to see what's a remodel versus what's new construction or an addition, because those are really different activities, really different numbers.
Can I just tell you, as data people, which I know you are 100% and you are, and so are you, one of the things in terms of just the curtain back in our building and our planning departments, we've been working on what type of data we're putting in so that we have a little better systematic method to categorizing and naming things, especially as it relates to like ADUs, for example. We've conducted a few research projects like this, and because the sections don't ask us to enter it a specific way, it makes it a little more difficult to pull that data out. So to your point, like if we had a separate category that said 0 to 500 square feet, 500 to 1,000, 1,000 to 1,500, we could easily filter that and kind of like look at it more closely. But it takes more effort in this case, and sometimes the effort isn't worth it because
Yeah.
we don't have all like for, I don't know, bathroom remodel online 157. There's no details about square footage, right? So it could be a 50 square foot. It could be a bathroom with only a toilet and a sink, or it could be a bathroom with a jacuzzi. We have no idea unless we pulled that permit, looked at those plans.
Yeah.
So
Looked at
What
the
would be
address.
interesting statistic for us as a group to publish out, if you have the information, how many people are doing battery walls? How many people are doing solar? Because I think that our community is probably leading the way. And just from the people I've talked to, a lot of people are doing batteries or they're upgrading their electrical panels. A number like that would be good for us to publicize about our town. You know, if we have a higher than normal rate of people electrifying already on their own without,
and would you recommend that we do that as a means to help encourage
right thing.
people to continue to do that. Okay.
And as a means when we are writing about our environmental stuff
Yeah.
in our Athertonian, that we
Yeah.
can brag a little
Yeah, they would
bit.
like that. There was a study that the UK did about people paying taxes a few years ago, and there was a consulting firm that said you should tell people how many of their neighbors have already paid their tax bill. And it was like they were like, oh, your neighbor, like 65% of your neighbors have already paid their tax bill. And then after that went out, like 95% of the remaining
Yeah.
30 that hadn't paid because they were like, oh my God, I can't be the
Yeah.
unpaid
Yeah.
guy.
But I think
No, I
it
look
could
at
be
the
a
other way. I
really,
said, hey, if they paid, I don't have to.
Good
But see,
bragging.
and then there's the Ken, the other 5.
but
we
it could
also-
be a project for one of the interns.
That could be cool.
See,
You
we
know,
already lead in the number of electrical vehicles.
Yeah.
So we want to also say, but we're also electrifying our homes on our own.
No, that's
So these
good feedback.
nice bragging rights to
And
have
that's
that we publish.
to the point of kind of what we were looking to get from you guys. I think that's great ways to engage our residents about the work that we're doing and encourage them to continue it. And maybe it'll also develop into some other form of like information, education, event, something like that. I don't know how much more you have to go through, but we want to save some time for Ken's discussion on Brightview and a little bit of an Earth Day update. We've got about 30 minutes left.
So what we're gonna do is, he's gonna have to read the thing anyway. Are we now sending comments to the reach codes? Is that it?
So how about I read my conclusion because that was next, and then we can talk about what the EPC wants to do next.
So what are you saying?
I'll read my conclusion
Okay,
and my staff report, and then if there are any more questions, we'll take them, and then we can talk about what the EPC is going to do next. So the proposed ordinance amendments, attachment 2, is centered around electric readiness, as mentioned. And this, staff thinks, provides a practical approach to prepare new construction and major renovations for future electrification, in line with evolving state and regional policies, as mentioned. By focusing on infrastructure improvements at the earliest and least cost stages, the town positions itself to meet upcoming decarbonization mandates while reducing long-term retrofit costs for homeowners. The inclusion of additional electric-ready requirements for all gas propane appliances aligns with the town's broader sustainability and public health goals. These measures will help ensure that Atherton is well prepared for the state's transfer to cleaner, all-electric buildings, offering flexibility for residents and developers while promoting healthier, more energy-efficient homes. At the October 30th, 2024 special meeting session, the council provided feedback on specific elements to include in the ordinance. A formal ordinance reflecting this input will be introduced in December of 2024 for initial consideration and first reading, incorporating the adjustments based on the council's direction. This is the EPC's opportunity to provide feedback and recommendation to the council for the official first reading of the draft Reach Code ordinance. Any questions, comments, or concerns?
So you're saying are you expecting their feedback before the 24th meeting?
Before the December 18th meeting. So what we discussed,
18th meeting?
yeah, so ideally, we would have all read the staff report, the ordinance, and have came with questions or comments. It seems like some of us aren't fully prepared to give a recommendation from their own personal stance, let alone to contribute to a group consensus. So at this point, I turn it back to the EPC to ask you what you would like to do. Again, as mentioned earlier, I'm not sure what the turnaround time for an official second reading is going to be with the city council schedule. So I'm not sure if there will be time to have a formal EPC meeting where you can provide another session of input for the draft, or if the EPC is going to have to be proactively involved in the city council meetings if you want to give input. If we don't have a recommendation today or before that council meeting, as mentioned, we can submit public comment. And in your public comment, you say your name, Crystal Sawyer Mendoza, Amy Farrell, resident of Atherton, also an EPC member. That the council reads your public comments so they know who you are. But other than that, you can't submit a recommendation on behalf of the EPC.
And we could also call a special meeting for the EPC to.
well,
to
you
do
know,
that.
I don't think we,
Subcommittee that would then be able to work
Oh, yeah.
on something and present.
And one
something to them.
exists.
but I don't know that we need to do that. I feel like the EPC interestingly represents the natural differing of opinions in the town.
I
There's
agree.
no consensus, and neither is there consensus on council.
We don't have to
and-
force that.
We don't have to force that. I think each of us come with our own recommendations based on our knowledge and our goals for our customers or clients, our residents. And so my recommendation, I'd like to hear from Gregory and Kim, but my recommendation would be the EPC has asked a lot of questions, has reviewed. I think we are all in favor of transparency for the council so that they can make a decision. I highly doubt that even if we had consensus, that our recommendation would influence the council. The council has 3 former EPC members, right? I don't know that Rick was ever on the EPC or Bill, but the other 3, you, Stacy, and Elizabeth, all were. So the reason you're asking for us to give a group recommendation is so that those, if we were to say push forward with the REACH codes, then those who are in favor of the REACH codes could say, well, the EPC has recommended it. But I don't know that for me, I'm not as comfortable because clearly we have differing opinions. And we need to hear from Gregory. We need to hear from
Yeah,
Sue.
I agree with everything you said.
So do I.
I think that's a really good point, Amy. I think also our job here today is to bring you this content and this presentation, hence the staff report. You could consider this essentially just a staff presentation, and you can take this information with you as you please and provide input to the council as well. I think you provided a really good point on a formal EPC recommendation. If you all agree with that, then I think that's good.
But
Yeah, I don't
I'd
think
be
it'll
open
be a
to
full-
getting some individual comments from the different committee members so that we can kind of provide some of that background information in our reports to council. Again, the method is not this person on the committee feels this way. It's the EPC had a discussion. Here were some perspectives provided from them. One would already be, providing the residents with some data around what a remodeling project for a kitchen versus a full thing and how costs might be impacted. That was suggested that to help inform and educate residents. Other things were, hey, providing some data around permits and how that impacts the council's decision on what would be realistic or, appropriate for putting some details in the ordinance. So I think we've already got some of that feedback and we're open to any other things that you think could not only help the council make a good decision, but also educate and inform the residents once this goes wherever it might go.
So we're done with this. We're gonna move on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Before we do
Gregory, are you comfortable with that? Because would
Yes,
you?
I am absolutely comfortable.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, before we move on.
I have to say something controversial. It makes me a little bit sad because the goal of the EPC is to advise the council on environmental topics. So I'm a little sad to hear that we're so disjointed that we can't come up with a coherent feedback. That makes me a little sad. So
I just
wanna
think it's
say.
That's the world.
no, but it's the reality of the representation on the EPC. I don't.
Look at the election on the 4th of November, 5th of November. Forget about what happened nationally. Look at Berkeley. Berkeley, who led the removal of natural gas, had a referendum in Berkeley to raise the taxes on natural gas to even make it more difficult to use. It lost overwhelmingly, like 60 to 30, 60 to 35. The state of Washington, more liberal than California in many ways, had their version of the EPC up for a referendum for the entire state. Of the REACH codes, it lost.
All right, I still have to be an idealistic, Ken, because somebody in this world's got to stand up for the children and where the world's going, and it's not
And we all
through
are,
our
I will tell
wallets
you.
right now.
But-
anyway,
The best
all
thing
right.
you could do for the world's pollution right now is drill and ship natural gas and get rid of all the coal and all the oil being used for power production.
Well, maybe what we could
So,
do is
but-
each of the EPC members could share their recommendations with staff. And so Gregory, if you had a few thoughts, I'm going to share a few thoughts. But again, to try to come to consensus when we clearly are not on the same page, I think it would take too much time, and I don't think we would come to consensus.
Here's my recommendation, which I'd like to vote on at the next meeting. And it basically says that what we should do is endorse the long run objectives of the REACH code, but not make it mandatory. We should make it a resolution and not an ordinance. And then in general, we should turn to the state and federal government for the law but we can give guidance to our residents. So it says, we love the Reach Code, we love everything behind it, just don't make it an ordinance, make it a resolution. And trust the Atherton people who are good people, smart, have their own problems, their own issues, let them make the decision.
How do we get this to Gregory? So he,
I sent it to him by email.
oh, and so you're bringing this to council
No, I'm bringing it to us for discussion
for our next meeting?
for our next meeting, yeah.
I can include this in the meeting
Anyway,
materials.
that's-
Thank you. Okay, I think with that, we know what to do next. Moving on to the next agenda item, discussion on low-speed vehicles in Atherton. This was something that I saw a lot of email exchanging about, and I figured there was interest in having this conversation at the EPC, so I wanted to allow a little bit of time for that.
The low-speed vehicles.
Yes.
I'll just make that very quick. We had a meeting with the police and some other members. We looked at the low-speed vehicles, which basically are golf carts. And the good news is you can use them anywhere you want up and down the peninsula. Under 35 miles an hour, they can get on any road you want. They're easy to drive, everything else. I don't see them having any place in Atherton because two things. One, I just don't see our guys driving golf carts. But more importantly, there's no side impact protection. It's unsafe for seniors. I think it's nice to know it exists. Some people may want to use them. So if anybody wants to buy one and use it after it, great. But I don't think it's worth our time to talk about. Does that make sense to you? But having said that, at Earth Day, I was going to recommend the guy who does this provide us some EV vehicles for shuttle around Earth Day. Two from the parking lots. I'm sorry, low-speed vehicles.
Did you also look at WeMo and all those? Because that is the thing that's coming up to city councils across the country because you have to approve them. And when I was at some meeting with a bunch of mayors and stuff, they said they'll come and do a free demo for us. So if we want to have a
I'm
free
going to tell you,
demo,
let me say,
The
WeMo and,
autonomous
so I talked to
things,
the WeMo guys at length.
yeah.
they've been applying for permits to test throughout. the state.
Somehow they might need to get city approval.
Yeah.
I don't know how that works.
We've never
but-
granted it.
So
Yeah.
I talked
But they're
to the
doing it.
WeMo guys at length, okay? And I had also had that discussion in the senior group and also with Dick Brown. The
Mhm.
idea being, would WeMo be a good alternative for seniors to come to meetings at night, rain, all the rest, they don't have to drive, all that sort of thing, right? And our discussion at that point was, again, seniors without a formal review of those discussions was seniors really don't want to get into a car without someone in it.
Yeah.
Many of the times they need help to get in and out. And if you're over, a certain age, you don't trust a car without a driver,
I'm over that age.
but actually,
We did it in the
but
city
actually, if
last
you're over a
time.
certain age, you don't trust a car with a driver either. That's another story.
Hello?
But so my personal recommendation, not the
Hello?
not the EPC, no senior discussion. My personal recommendation is I would not pursue them in the town for taxis. But what I would do is I'd talk to the chief. If you could outfit a WeMo with surveillance and send it around at night, that would be a nice solution as far as surveillance issues. So I'm going to go back to WeMo and say, we're not interested in, at least I'm not, you can go elsewhere in running as a standard thing, but think about surveillance. Anybody else feel different? I mean, do you see us using WeMos or, yeah, okay.
For the golf cart, I'd just say, I think the safety issue that you brought up is the biggest one because of our challenges with El Camino, which splits our town. So I think it could be, we already have cyclists getting hit, and I think we could have other accidents, particularly if young drivers got into the golf carts.
Presentation I had last night from our public works director and included data around fatalities, serious injuries in Atherton. I think we've been very fortunate. We have two major throughways and highways in town, Middlefield and El Camino, not even including Alameda Ville's Pulgas. So I think adding this that number will change dramatically.
Yeah.
I also think that as people start getting more accustomed to using those electrical scooters and e-bikes over the next 5 to 10 years, that will also impact that data. And this would just be, and then frankly, and that's why my mic is muted. As a town staff member, I didn't think it would be good for optics for our residents to float around town and, their golf course. I'm sincerely, I think we would.
But we should, we should give it, well,
I do. I know, I mean, it's just like, you see. I
It's hard to hear you.
know.
Sorry, Gregory, we were just wrapping up the conversation. Ken had brought forward the idea of having golf carts or
Yeah, I know, I know.
low-speed vehicles.
low-speed vehicles in town for residents. And then he was saying, after he did some research and some focus groups, really, that the consensus was that they would be dangerous because they
Yeah,
don't,
I heard that part, yeah.
yeah. Maybe we should move to the next one.
Yeah. What's the next one?
Earth Day. So we've got 15 minutes. We can give you a very general overview, an update on where we're at, and Cristobal will take the lead, and then give you guys an opportunity if there's anything that's developed recently you want to share with us as a group, and we can let it go from there. Yeah, sure. All
right. So, sorry, let me pull up my staff report for reference. In the staff report, very similar language to the previous staff report, just the history of what the EPC's role has been in Earth Day, specifically this last year, and then of course the transition to staff. In the staff report, I also provided some updates, and I'll say them now. Feel free to ask any questions or comments. So far, what we've done for Earth Day as of November of this, or as of this month, is posted a save the date in the Fall Athertonian, which hopefully you all got and saw. We've also posted the event on the town calendar for people to be notified and see when they're looking for events on the town calendar. We've drafted a volunteers frequently asked questions document so that volunteers can reference as to what can I look forward to, what to expect for volunteering as a part of Earth Day. We've also created a vendor interest form, and this is a form for vendors to fill out to express interest in participating in our event. And once they submit that form, we essentially vet them or research them and make sure that they're someone we want to collaborate with. And then we confirm their participation in Earth Day. For that, we've already began sending that out to this list right here. You'll see a list of our community partners and groups, some of which have been recently added and not reached out to yet, but some of which have. If you zoom out a little bit, Anthony, you might be able to see a column. Oh, maybe it's a little small. Yeah. The column F is a yes if we've contacted them. And then column G is yes or no if they've filled out the vendor interest form. And that's essentially internally how we're tracking that.
And while we're going through this, let me just so historically, I would say over the last 3 years, Earth Day has had a theme, right? But we've also invited these various community partners, whether they're in line with that theme or not, right? Menlo Fire, the Knox School, maybe even ADAPT, and then we try to find something about what they're interested in doing and like hope that it fits in that theme. Part of what we're thinking about internally, and we're open to getting some feedback from the committee and eventually maybe even council and other staff are, as we design Earth Day, do we want to continue to make it a community event around Earth Day where we engage town partners like, the vendors we work with and the schools and everything? Or do we want to cultivate that list a little more narrow, which is some of the feedback I think we've heard, to make sure that whatever partners we invite to table the event are aligned with that theme, right? So that might mean maybe the police department doesn't have a table. Maybe the fire department doesn't have a table. Maybe ADAP doesn't have a table because they're not in line with biodiversity. So that could be a part of it. Or no, we don't care if they're aligned with this theme. We want to make this event available to them because it fits in terms of our community event around Earth Day. So that's kind of the
Would their feelings
discussion.
be hurt if they didn't come?
That part I'm not even,
No, what I'm saying is, do they feel they have to come?
some yes and some no.
If
So
we
I
said you
think,
don't have to come, they wouldn't care.
and so that's part of part of the update I think would be very valuable for us is to know not a part of the logistics and planning, we're taking care of that. Hey, we think this is a community event around Earth Day and inviting all partners far and wide. Yes. No,
Yes,
we think we should
absolutely.
focus.
Yes, that's the best way.
Yeah, I agree with
agree with that
Gregory,
too.
because even if they say no, like
Mhm.
Ken said, if they're not interested, say police decides they're not, well, they don't
Right.
have to participate. I think you make it optional, but then you're integrating in their mind, oh, there's this Earth Day event, maybe
Yeah.
I'll bring my families.
Mhm.
I know Officer Bobby brought his kids, his son last
Yeah,
year.
yep.
Yeah. And so, if people are aware, and I think we also make them aware that there's a theme,
Sure.
because I feel like the theme brings some level of cohesiveness. If people have games,
Right.
especially for the small kids, that could make it a little bit more tangible.
Sure.
Otherwise, Earth Day goes in a lot of different
Yeah.
directions.
And that's where I'm leaning, because there's partners like the Friends of the Library or the library who we can absolutely say, hey, can you find something that aligns with the theme?
Yeah,
For
yeah, yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Bring books.
And they
You
bring, right, so
remember,
them, we're not worried about,
kids
right?
They
books.
can do
And I will
Absolutely.
say ADAPT and the fire are involved because environmental issues involve changing climate, which is causing increased emergencies in its environmental stuff. So
And right,
That's-
so,
natural connection.
right, and
HIP
there's-
housing, maybe not so, but we have our people there, so we should definitely let them be
right.
there.
So there are partners who have environmental and sustainable topics they can talk about, but they may not be in line with this year's theme. And if we're okay with that, we just want to make sure
So
that
we
if-
invite them, we don't coerce them.
we invite them, we tell them what our theme is, we ask them if they have an interest in doing something
Exactly.
related
Well,
to that theme, and they may say
Sounds
yes
great,
or
yeah.
no, but we'll attend either way.
Yeah, it sounds
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Okay,
So for example, ADAPT can do a thing about rescuing animals in emergencies.
great.
Love
So,
that,
and we
because
can talk to
Have
different
materials
people.
on that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
that's good. I think that's the feedback we wanted on that part.
but they should still be invited. But if they can bring something for the theme, that would be really awesome.
Okay.
And so, especially knowing that that's what we're wanting to do, we can include that when we reach out, is that we want you to curate the experience to the theme.
Well,
I
invite
think
them to.
If
don't
they
force
could, yeah, I was going to say invite them to. Maybe they all don't align. I didn't realize ADAP did that, but
Me either.
I have read things where you can have, as part of your emergency plan, some food for your pets or,
They did have that at our last one. They
Okay.
had the kennel, they had they had the bug out bag for animals. I didn't see it, but I know that that was one of the things they brought. So given the theme this year, they should make sure they bring that again. But,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a
it might make
combination.
it more fun for them too, because
Yeah.
it's kind of put on your creative hat. Like, how can
How
you,
can you engage people?
yeah,
Now might be an appropriate time for us to talk a little bit about some of the special secret sauce things that we've brainstormed and we're moving forward with. Again, we're not looking to engage the committee unless you want to hear about it, about all the, hey, this is how many tables we've got and we're going to get tents and, we've got this going on. We've got that. We feel very comfortable about that, especially that we started early. Some of the special activities that we've brainstormed and talked about, we've got a master list of the schools and we've got contacts at the schools. We may or may not move forward with something related to art. We're already engaged with Dorothy and the Arts Foundation to talk about what we can do, how we can do it, and if we will. So that part's being worked on. We've talked internally about creating other service projects and then reaching out to the Boy Scouts and all the middle schools, local elementary schools, including the private and the public, and engaging them and saying, would you be interested in this service project? And so we're looking at designing 2 or 3, giving them an animal or a series of animals and saying, would you want to create some type of education or information where you table the event around this? So that's one of those secret sauce, engaging things, engage the community, engage the youth, the residents, far and wide, right? Because we've got kids that live here that go to Nueva, kids that don't live here and go to Sacred Heart, right? So we're reaching out to the schools for
I
that.
add on that?
Please.
When we were talking about before, the list that we made for the schools so far has only been the person who's a volunteer person.
Mhm.
I asked our teenager group, what do they call, the youth
Youth advisor,
council,
yeah.
to each of them go back to their school and give us, how do you publish stuff within the school? Because I know the deadlines for our schools are coming up already
Mm.
because a lot of the kids have already signed up. So we should have not only the contact for volunteer, but we should have the person to submit our little ads
Okay.
to. And then the third thing is either the people that are teaching environmental science or who are teaching sustainability at their school. And the reason why I say that, getting back on what you were just talking about, is the Earth Day International has a list of points. They have a sheet. They have a fact sheet for for our theme.
Mhm.
So they have a fact sheet. One idea would be to give that to a sustainability class and see if the teacher has an interest in having each of the kids do a
Right.
thing on that. And each kid does a poster. So they're going to talk about, you'd pick a species or whatnot. But then we have exhibits that are visual and they're information based.
I think
If
that's
we
great.
could- If we could get the kids to do it, and we can give them the fact sheet, and then they're just doing the art. So if it's not done through the art department per
Yep.
se, can also be done through sustainability. But if we have to do it early, because all the APs for sustainability, that the advanced placement for those kids literally is in the Earth Day week. So
Okay.
in the past, we were not able to get them because we engaged them really late and they were already on APs and they're sorry, we can't do anything. We're on AP.
So we talked about it over the last few weeks, and our plan is to get those emails out. We've got superintendent contacts, we've got counselor contacts. We don't have the teachers all, but getting that out before the end of this year so
Yeah.
that we can say, hey, if you're interested, we need to know by January 31st,
Actually,
2020.
we did get out early to Lance Powell and Sarah Wall at MA. They both teach
I remember
environmental
that,
science.
yeah.
Yeah, we got to them early. The curriculum is so tight and packed that they
For the
can't
AP.
ask
They didn't
the
have a
kids
whole
to
lot
do
of, yeah,
other projects.
yeah.
And that would be, I would say, more for a middle school. I think high school students are probably wouldn't have the time unless it was part of a club. That's my feeling from talking to Mr. Powell 2 years ago.
And we may uncover the same thing. So our plan is the local middle school, Hillview, and the private schools, the local for those types of things. We have the elementary schools as like an invite option, but not really a project. And then the high schools. So
Well, that digital arts professor that's participated every year, he's done an environmental theme and he gave it every year. So he's done it at least 2 years in a row with, and he's got the frames and everything. So I would at least ask him, even if it's not part of the art show, but do this same kind of idea, an informational thing, and have him do it with his students, because they do it and they produce about 15 of those that are already framed and ready to.
Well, then
What
maybe
school?
what we could suggest is a communication that comes from the mayor to head of school. So to each of the heads of school, that Christabel, you could draft the communication, and it could be when the Earth Day is, and it doesn't need to be a customized letter. It could go, to our education partners in town, and then and it could go to the schools, private schools outside of town, like Priory or Nueva.
Yep.
And then you could say when it is, what the theme is, and that you could do an ask. One of our biggest challenges has been to how do we properly engage all the different stakeholders within your academic institution, whether they're teachers on the content, like science content, or the art instructors, or the heads of different affinity groups on campus. Like I know they'll have a sustainability club or an eco club. So can we ask you to push this out to the champions that you have and let us know? We'll follow up next week with a call. And then you follow up, Christabel will follow up with a call, and we will collect the names of the people from you so that there's an ask and then a follow-up call. And then we'd like the minimum of, 6 names. And then that way they have to give you a contact person rather than just giving us Ava Petrash, who's great at collecting service hours from Menlo School, but she's not connected to everyone else. Or Lance Powell, who's just focused on getting his kids to get 5s on the AP. He's maybe not connected with people doing the other clubs. So I would have a letter, but you sign it, don't you think?
Absolutely. And I've laid the groundwork for what you're saying, because early on, when I first became mayor, I called for a meeting with each of the heads of the schools, of the private schools. Not all of them said yes, but I did meet, George and I met with the ones that we did, most of them, I brought this topic up. And I said, we need help getting access. And so all of them have already heard it, and they all said yes, 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 including that, not just the high school, and the college too. So we did have a meeting. So they've already heard this from us. So it would be absolutely. And thank you for suggesting that, because you're right. We should follow up with a letter now that it's time and do it soon so that
We
we
can
get
tackle that.
that connection.
We can tackle that.
And if
Uh,
you guys draft it, we can look at it. Yeah, Greg, sorry.
Yeah, no, I just want to ask you, are we gonna have the sheep again?
No, I don't think so. I think we've done that. Well, I'll wrap up that with the Brightview when you're done.
Sure.
Because that attracted a lot of interest. I mean, it may be too much work, but it was very interesting to a lot of kids.
No. We'll have a decide on that. I'll come back to you, but I think I want to replace sheep this year, all kidding aside, with turtles.
With what?
Turtles.
Oh.
Turtles. You're back with that. What happened to the owls and the falcons? You led us down the falcons path.
I'm not, you can still do a falcon. Turtles and falcons get along. Falcons can't pick up a turtle, it's too big. But no, I'm sure, I'll come back to you. You can hear this. We're going to do a turtle scene.
All right, turtles are fine with me.
Love it.
Anyway, go on, you guys.
Thank
Sorry.
you, Amy. That was a really good suggestion. We'll include that. We actually do have a draft email to the schools that I had Anthony look at. I think it's a good idea to maybe have it come from the mayor. We'll see if that is appropriate. But I do like the idea of the ask. We didn't include that portion. I think it's really good, especially since we're working on drafting a master contact list. So that'll be really helpful. So while Anthony has this sheet open, I did want to touch on how I'm envisioning Earth Day of being the community resources area, essentially ADAPT, the library, Rikers Center, Menlo Fire, Cal Water, they're all tabling here. They're not necessarily tied to the theme, but they're still our community resources. And they can provide things to hand out. They could provide education, awareness, or information, whatever they have to offer. And if you scroll down a little bit, Anthony, we have our committees and our schools. So the committees and the schools would also be a part of the community resources. I listed committees to invite to Earth Day that tied into Earth Day, and then as well as the schools. If you scroll down a little bit more, so for the schools portion, we talked about having this kind of education project to give students, to give out at the schools. And we haven't necessarily ironed this out, but I really like the idea of having middle schoolers present, to having an education or schools area where the students can essentially have these exhibits or demos or whatever we curate out of this educational portion.
And part of that, the idea behind that was the request from the council to make sure that we're engaging youth. And I think last year we did to some degree, but we can expand it. So
Also, we did get council feedback on having this event be education, awareness, and information, and not necessarily vendors selling products. So this is kind of tying into that education, awareness, and engaging the youth. So right now we have a community resources kind of area for Earth Day. We also have the schools, education, expos, and demos section. And then we have the vendors tied into the theme. And here we have a list of organizations that you have all generously shared with me. Also organizations that were participating in previous Earth Days that we want to hopefully invite back that are a part of this theme. And then this list is constantly growing. So if you have other organizations that you think we should be reaching out to, please feel free to share them. We're also researching more. Yeah, thank you for adding that one. But right now we essentially have 3 categories of vendors for Earth Day. We have the community resources, we have the schools, and then we have the vendors that are tied to the theme. And so with that, let me pull up my staff report just to remind you, EPC. For the main activity, we're hoping that the EPC can offer something around education and awareness, physical demonstrations, hands-on activities, or other family-friendly activities. So with these 3 umbrella terms or 3 categories of the vendors that we have right now, this is kind of what I have for you. If it sparks any ideas for the main activity that we'd like to have, or if you want staff to continue to plan Earth Day as we continue to think about this main activity. But this update is essentially to inform you on what we have so far and where we're heading, just to see if that could inform any ideas for the main activity.
can I also mention in terms of budget, we've decided that we're going to look at an option for the bike valet as reaching out to the Boy Scouts, which came from, I think, Councilmember DeGolia, and asking them for a service project. Would you guys be interested in manning our bike valet? We can easily rent some of the racks and then have 2 or 3 of them manage that for us. So that's one idea we've had, and we'll work that out. And another budgetary thing is we think that not making maybe ice pops is like if you bike valet, but to help get people there early, first come, first serve, first 50 ice pops is free. And since we're going to save $2,000 on the bike valet, we should be able to afford that. We just want to see if you guys felt good about that.
That's great.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah, we have a little, but it's not much to look at, but
Yeah, so what Anthony's going to pull up right now is a quick proposed budget that I've drafted. And of course, will also be ironed out as we start to confirm things, book things, and rent. But we did want to leave wiggle room for budget for the main activity. Right now, as of now, it's a very straightforward budget as to what we could use again. DJs, the bike station rentals, the food trucks, the Beetle Lady, pop-up rentals, tables and chairs, staff for the day from Public Works, advertising, Pop Nation, and signage. Right now, we've used or allocated more than half of the budget for just those basic logistical necessities. And we are going to anticipate a little bit more, but we did want to give a little bit of wiggle room for that main activity.
and just for the food trucks, we don't plan to give volunteers food from food trucks. We're going to put another budget in for food for volunteers, and we're just going to get pizzas and stuff and have it in the main house for them. The food truck budget is because if we use Food Fleet again, they offer that guaranteed minimum to their vendors. I'll work with them to see if they can bring it down, but I don't want to be in a position where we're guaranteeing these
Yeah,
3
yeah.
different food trucks can sell 1,200 a piece. So I'm just going to see if they, and I don't think Sodexo is going to
So you
supplement.
Put pizzas inside the house.
Yeah, we're gonna have, like,
Make-
the last time the idea was, we have this check-in station for volunteers.
Lot of
We'll still
sense.
have that check-in station, but
Yeah.
we're gonna have the main house reserved for them as a break room, a hangout room to just adult volunteers and kid volunteers. And we're gonna stack that with food, pizza, and maybe even some sandwiches from Costco. And we're gonna have that budgeted separately. And I'll even talk to City Manager Rodrick about that coming out of a non-Earth Day budget.
I totally love that idea, but let me just warn you something from experience. Last time, a lot of the kids that are volunteers are teenagers.
Yes.
And there was big concern about allowing them into the house unsupervised, having food and making a huge mess and
Yep.
we'd have to pay for it to be vacuumed. And 2, that they would go in and hang out and get in trouble.
So I recognize that. We're doing for
you know.
volunteer management, we're gonna do shifts.
Okay.
And so we're going to
Yeah.
have 4 or 5 shifts. So people won't be there the whole time. So the only way a kid would be there hanging out the whole time is if they signed up for more than 1 shift. And since we're starting much earlier, our plan for volunteer management is we're going to have those same listening sessions. We'll start one first week of January. Part of that outreach to the schools initially as designed was to get volunteers engaged with all these different schools and, flyer and all that. But I don't disagree. I just think
Yeah. I agree
it'll
with
save us money. And
I love that
and,
idea.
if we have to pay to vacuum the carpets, I think let it be Ovadia's problem. He can't
I
complain.
totally agree.
I love it. I think it's great. So we need to think a little bit about the main event. Is that
Mhm.
right?
The Raptor.
Has
or-
anyone done any? Because I have a few feedback items on this. Have you guys had, none of us went to the Raptor event, right? Now, there are 2 partners involved in that, so at minimum, we can contact those 2 partners. One was Open Space, and I forgot who the other one was. And so I have the links to those, so I would
Okay.
be glad to help on this. And I think the subcommittee, I'd love to work with the subcommittee on the secret sauce.
There's this thing too, this Palo Alto Junior Museum. There's,
Yes,
they
they
have, yeah,
do it.
so,
They usually have a guy who comes with 1 bird on his shoulder. That's what they've done historically. We'll be competing because he goes to the other places.
okay.
Dorothy just sent us a Falcon link.
Yes, I looked into
That's
them.
the same one. Are they the same ones that did the other one, or is that a different one?
So I think they were different. I think it was just a contact connection, but I did look into them. And one thing that came up is the thought of, are they prey or do they prey on smaller animals?
They
Because
prey
we
on
might
small
have
animals.
farm animals, other animals coming. And so I'm not sure if having them at the Earth Day event
Yeah.
is the best idea or if having them as a showing part of the library a better idea, where we could follow a story time with a book on falcons or raptors, and then someone can come do a demo for an hour or 2. And that could be another event during Earth Month. But yes, we did look into it. We're still looking into whether it's going to be feasible for Earth Day. I think we've reached out, and I'll have to confirm. But once we do make contact, we'd have to see if that's feasible for the event because there may be other animals.
Well, it is true that when they did that up, the one that we didn't go to, the Raptor Fest, it was really removed in the middle of nowhere. So, but on the other hand, I've been to these and there is one of the, two of these are offered by companies. And the one, the Dorothy, may be one of the companies and they charge like $500 like the Bug Lady. And those birds are so trained, it doesn't matter. They do
They're
it in
just
the public venue.
Rather than,
Yeah, and
They
they
give a
come
class.
to your location.
And then they give a whole class on it and they talk about how they fit in the cycle and how they're used in sustainable farming. And the other thing is, you were talking about owl boxes. What happened to that? Is that not of interest anymore or?
it's interesting to me, but I passed it on. Robert O'Belly said they don't want owl boxes in the town.
Because I
They
think
don't allow them?
They don't want them.
the manure management?
They gotta be cleaned out all the time.
Okay. What about, well, there's aphids. So if one of our city partners is going to be the hardware guys, so if they're going to be invited, we should specifically ask them to bring ladybugs. They don't have to sell them, but they do actually sell them and they come in a box and ladybugs are alternative. So it's, again, the ecosystem of animals, how
I
they're
am going
helping
to have,
us.
if Amy allows me, because we're not speaking anymore, but if she allows
We are
me,
speaking.
I'm gonna have 1,000 worms at
You're
our
bringing
table.
worms?
I'm bringing worms, and at the end, we're gonna give them away to people to take home.
I think that'll be fun.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm gonna have to stop pretty soon, but I just wanted to mention two things. One, are we gonna have any speakers?
We don't have a plan. We don't have a plan for that right now. We've talked about speakers versus the movie and it's up in the air unless we get.
Okay, that's fine.
that it's right.
I just wanted to find out whether you were planning it or not. The
I
other
think
thing is-
internally, we worry about who we're looking to engage with that, and it does cause a bit of a logistical challenge when you try to incorporate a
Sure.
movie, speakers, and a vendor summit all in the same.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. The other thing is, you remember that I had sent you an article on plastics, and because of several things that happened in California, I updated the article, and I'm going to send it back to you. I can send it to Christabel or Anthony, and you can do whatever you want with it. But
Thank you, sir. Yeah, we can probably use that like we did before to help promote Earth Day as like topics related to Earth Month or sustainability, and just use
Yeah.
it as break it
Okay.
up to.
because
media.
there are some interesting developments.
So can I ask a question? The assumption is not that we're limiting our vendors just to the conservation theme. It's all, everything's all environmental, but on top of that is conservation. Okay, Maureen Okiki, who was on our committee in the past and a volunteer, she's moved away, but her specialty is this. And she referred us to look at Conservation X, which I said to that man. And what they do is they invest in all sorts of stuff, everything from alternative meats to like things that are used to protect species. The other thing that I have here that she asked me to share with you is called Bioacoustics for Biodiversity, Sound Recordings Help Conservation. And I'll try to share that with everyone, but I guess the idea there is they are doing, in Earth Day International a few years ago, did this thing where they wanted us all to use our phones to record natural sounds of animals everywhere. And they're trying to map the bird sounds and animal sounds that are going away as a way to measure extinction. And so I will try, she sent me their link. I didn't know this particular group. I'll share it with everybody. But I know Earth Day International did do that one year and they have those materials. And I don't know if you guys have all seen, they do have a fact sheet on this topic, although this is not their big topic for the year. So we could use that.
I
to
think
show
that's
that.
great. I mean, having a general table on being a citizen scientist could be really good because there's a couple of different
Yeah, good idea.
ways you can do that. I know people take pictures of whales so that could be something that maybe we could task as a civic project for the Girl Scouts, maybe we haven't given them a project, or
They should do a
maybe,
cooking project.
or another group. The other thing I wanted to mention, coming back to the turtles, it made me think, the frog that has come up before.
The frog pond, yeah, the frog that's
So
up
is
on
it
the canal.
endangered?
We have a protected frog on the canal, and when we were doing our discussion about the canals, part of the thing is a sustainability study that will have to be repeated again on the frogs. So it would be really interesting to have some information about, did you know about our own frogs that we're protecting? And,
There's more than
an update on
one
that.
type of frog?
I don't know. I know that there's a whole ecosystem up there, and there's money in our budget for the canal to do that study again. Because we did give directions to the company, that the vendor that's going to do the canal, to try to optimize or think out of the box about what sustainable ways of being able to do more of that, because that's built in already.
That could just be fun. I'm thinking of the frog hats with the googly eyes for the kids. Like if something was the Atherton frog, or I'm assuming there's one, or if
We
there's
already have
more.
the toad. We'd have to change the toad to a frog.
The toad. Well, we can still have the toads, but I'm just thinking from a visual perspective, if there was a table that was on, and maybe it was our table that was on Protect the Atherton Frog, and then we had as a giveaway the googly eye hats that the frogs, and adults could wear those as well, but maybe there's a group out there that does amphibians that could bring an exhibit on the importance of amphibians to biodiversity.
Yeah, one of the things that would be really useful is if we had big posters on the numbers of species that are dying out is really shocking, and most people don't know it. So if we had just some big posters that were saying some of those facts would be, I mean, in terms of the goal of this thing is education, having those posters. And if we can't get students to make them, maybe we make them.
How to engage that Atherton Youth Advisory Council, because, as you note that they mentioned last night, they were instrumental in helping with Earth Day.
Yeah.
So I'd love that to be.
I called them for a meeting, but the thing is,
These were the
I don't
four kids there
understand
last
who's
night?
our subcommittee now for Earth Day. Who's on,
It's Amy.
and who else?
That's
Just-
it. at
I
this
meet with
point.
Christabel once a month. Yeah.
Okay.
We've met
Can
a
we have
couple
one
times.
with The youth council, and can I be
Yeah.
invited?
Well,
Is there any
yes.
reason why I
Sure.
can't
The
go?
the only thing I would say is no one picked up the idea of doing a poster, nor are they interested. I think it would be better for us in our budget to contact Conservation International and buy a poster. We can get the kind that they roll up, those huge ones that they come on a stand. They're like canvas, because then the facts are right. It's more attractive. It's branded. And usually those also like work in different types of weather. And so, or maybe we could,
$100 a piece, though.
maybe you could borrow them. I mean,
Yeah,
maybe
we
there's
try
a
to
way to borrow them from, the Youth Advisory Council could look into that. Can we borrow them from the Science Museum in San Francisco, or can we borrow them from someone in San Jose? I just know that the posters, from my experience, even in saying we'd get poster board and paints, and they're not going to be
Impactful.
full. They're not going to be professional looking. I don't think they're going to meet your expectations. So if we task them with another project, which is we need visuals around conservation, better if you can focus on the animals around here. So the pumas, I don't know if there's other things like the bobcats, something like that. Those predators, that would be something fun for them. And maybe there's Tusk-like organizations that have materials that we could leverage.
I did talk, Dorothy told me that Filoli had a collection of stuffed animals
Really?
that were in storage. And it took me a long time to sort through, and they had just sold it.
Oh, God.
But they had them in a storage closet. So they were things like the coyotes and all the animals that are here, which would have been ideal. But then it got me thinking that some of those are on display on some of if we contact like open space and some of those
I mean,
places.
stuffed animals.
Like they're taxidermied animals.
Yeah.
But they have one for, for example, the one that's at Arastradero Park. There's, some of them have little open reserve natural centers.
Yeah.
And they have stuffed things, and maybe they will allow us to borrow them for the day. And maybe they would have presentations. I don't know.
There's some strange animals like that at Bucks.
Yes, Bucks has,
Yeah, if we
Bucks
reach out
Restaurant
to our
has.
residents,
Yeah,
maybe
Bucks-
they have.
Bucks
Unfortunately, they might
Restaurant has a
bring in
bunch of stuff, doesn't
rhinos
he?
and
Yeah.
things like that we don't want.
Then the Tusk guy is
Big
like,
game.
I'm out.
Yeah. But I do think we can give them that task because they can start with California-based conservation organizations, ask if they have any installations
Sure.
that are already ready to
Is it
go,
California?
like conservation organizations. Maybe they can even contact, as the guy from Tusk mentioned, the San Diego Zoo. I mean, maybe the zoo has stuff that they put out on display that they'll share.
Yeah, what happened with our zoo? Because they used to have that truck, right? And then they stopped it after COVID. What did they do with that stuff? Can we find someone over there and ask if we can borrow
I've
it?
been reaching out.
Don't
They
answer.
they followed up to my original email saying that they aren't doing
Closed.
the program anymore. And I followed up asking if they had other programs that we could collaborate with or somehow collaborate for Earth Day. I followed up a few times that I haven't received any.
We might want to
Response.
try the Oakland Zoo as well.
Okay.
Is there may be somebody who has a conservation show. And like I said, there is, if we're willing to spend like $500, $800, there are conservation shows where they bring in animals and usually bird related or whatnot. And there's a few of those around, but you have to track them down. They're for private parties and for schools and stuff like that. But that may be what, I didn't look at the one that Dorothy had, but that might be one.
Is Dorothy the lady who did the kids' art last year?
Yes.
Is she doing it this year?
No.
Because
It was too much of a lift.
the reason I ask is in my conversations with the daily day school over there, the kids' school, what's her name? Sandy? Who's the runs it?
Susan?
Susan. Susan basically said, yeah, if someone wanted to put the kids' art over here and judge it at our school, they'd love it. Should love it.
Mm.
So that's an option for kids' art if you want to do it.
Mhm.
And you could do an endangered species kids' art thing at her school and have it judged.
Thank you.
Something.
Okay, you guys, I'm gonna have to quit now.
Okay, thank you. We
Sure.
we should do Ken's update on Brightview because I also have to leave by 3:30.
Okay, bye,
Yeah.
Greg.
I'm making
Okay,
sure.
bye.
Bye, thank you.
Okay, moving on.
Include me in the next time you guys meet. Because
Yeah,
I'll-
Christabel, and I meet the third Thursday, was it third?
The
I'll send you a meeting invite.
Thank you.
second Thursday of every
Second
month.
Thursday, yeah, and
The ones that were sent to me.
yeah, and the reason it's not a formal committee is we're giving everything to the staff. So the idea was that we would make recommendations and, but we were
no
not
longer
going to be
doing
involved in the
secret
weeds.
sauce. Remember, we had a subgroup that we said that the EPC would do the secret sauce.
But I think we
Yeah.
decided on the secret sauce, it's biodiversity, right?
No, the
Saying
main
like the event
activity.
Falcon. or-
Oh, that.
Special thing, the equivalent of the.
We are
Of the
shed.
sheep.
Yeah,
I did not
that
say
is
this.
for the
I've just
entire
arranged the last
EPC.
hour,
Yeah.
a turtle race,
Pardon me?
a turtle race.
That could be fun.
We're gonna have a
That
turtle
could be
race.
cute.
I
Can they
like the
walk on
turtle.
grass?
We're
Good.
gonna have different turtles sponsored by various people and have a turtle race.
I
And
like
what's the
that.
message we're giving though? Because remember the other, there has to be a message. So we've got the
They're
turtle.
turtles, they're endangered species.
Maybe the role that
Different
turtles
types.
play in ecosystems. I mean, they do
It's a
have a
race to
role,
keep the turtles.
a race for turtles.
We can, as staff, we can definitely look into some of the ideas that we've talked about today. But what I've been hearing is that we want to look at ready to go installations to see if we could do some kind of exhibit, a professional looking exhibit. Also considering conservation shows or demonstrations of animals, a turtle race, something like that is something that we can continue to explore.
Yeah, that would be great. But just coming back, Mayor, to your point about the committee or subcommittee, we just don't want to have a repeat of the last 2 years where any EPC members get caught into planning or time-consuming efforts for the event. So providing some high-level guidance, I think, is what we all felt we had the capacity to do, but none of us had the capacity to actually get into any of the weeds. So that's why I think you and I were meeting as chair of the EPC. It wasn't necessarily even all Earth Day. I think we even talked about other types of educational events. It doesn't mean we can't each give Christabel guidance and ideas, but I think our concern was it's too easy for all of us to get pulled into it and spending tremendous amount of time that we decided we weren't going to do it this year.
I thought the last, this is new to me because I thought that where we left it was that this group was going to do the special sauce. So now we're saying we're
Ideas for-
not,
Ideas,
No.
yeah.
Ideas.
We're still coming up with the ideas for sure.
But
okay.
I might be able to do the idea for the turtle. I'll work on it.
Okay.
And so the reason I say that staff is continuing to look into this is because as we continue to advance in our planning, in confirming, vendors and rentals and everything, you now have what we have to offer essentially for Earth Day and can build a main activity off of what we already have. So that's why I'm providing you these updates. And we're already going down the route of looking at these organizations.
Close it, break.
So we'll continue to explore them just as a part of Earth Day, and we'll continue to explore them with the idea of them potentially contributing to a main activity. So that the next time we present you with an update on Earth Day, hopefully we have even more updates and we can generate a main activity based off what we have. So that's the reason of updating you on where we are with Earth Day. Any questions,
Okay, so this
comments,
is
or
my
concerns?
30-second before he leaves, right view update.
Oh, yeah.
Remember the reason we did robots was not just to have fun, but the idea being that there are 2,500 homes in the town, average acre and a half. How many of those could have their current gas-eating lawnmower replaced with a battery robot? Probably a lot. But how do we get that to happen? If it happened, you would have a tremendous impact on noise and pollution, correct? So how do we do that? So the idea was we want to try and do a demo to do more work with Brightview, but we couldn't get it done. We finally had a call with them, and here's what Brightview said. Tell me where I'm wrong. Robots, we love robot lawnmowers. We use them in. They've got this thing called the Villages, you might know, in San Jose, which is a couple hundred acres. They use them everywhere. And so our question was, why don't you use them here? And they said, well, because one of the things you got to do is you got to make sure you don't have a kid out there or a dog out there or something with a robot. You kind of make sure that you watch who's around the robot, really. I think that's oversaid, but maybe. So then the question I had was, well, why don't you do it at night? And so, no, hadn't found that. But basically, they were very positive, I thought, toward robots. They had no issue about replacing labor, not because they replace labor, because they can't get labor. So basically, it allows them to use the guys they're doing something else. So they were very positive. So now the question is, how do we make the next step to get more adoption in the town? So I'll make this very quick. But what happened is, I went to this robot meeting a couple weeks ago by the guys who remember Dan Maybe or Magby or whatever it was, AGSA. And they had they were sponsored by the high schools in Santa Clara County, an area where the high schools have decided they're going to go to robots on their lawns. So they had a demo at the high school, at the grade school, actually. And when I got there, I found that what they said was the biggest deterrent they have to selling robots, lawnmowers, into a place like this is they're all done by largely, immigrant workers, right? The landscapers are largely immigrant workers, and they don't have a lot of skills. They're not technically very skillful, don't have great English language skills, and they have no cash. So how can you buy a $3,000 robot to mow a lawn when you can't rent it and you don't have cash? So what the robot guys have done now is they've said, we're going to take that all out of here. Not going to be a problem. We'll come in. We'll come to their house. We will set up the GPS because they got to have GPS to run the robot. We'll make sure it works. We'll deliver you the robot and you run it. We'll make sure it works. If there's ever a problem, call us. We'll come and fix it. But you run it from your cell phone. And an example is that the homeowner pays you $250 a month just to do lawn, not to cut anything else, just cutting lawn. We rent it to you for $150. So you don't, when you get the $250 check, you send us $150. So cash flows, not an issue. Cash is not an issue. Technology is not an issue. Let's go for it. So what we're trying to do is find guys who will do that. I found one guy who happened to be at the meeting who does Sacred Heart, one Hispanic group of guys. And so I'm dealing with him now to say, Sacred Heart, Atherton residents, can we do some more examples? So I think eventually we can get there. It just takes time.
Cool. Can I ask one last question, you guys? What is the deadline in the Athertonian? And can you make sure that we all know that so that we have our Earth Day points that we want to go in there?
All one?
For the one that goes out before Earth Day?
I think it was like a month from, I remember, a month before.
We're trying to get content to try, I think before the end of this month. Like Christmas.
Before
But
Christmas?
that's for the one that goes out in January. There will be. yeah,
That's the one that's that's the one before Earth Day.
I mean, we can have
So-
to save the date for Earth Day. We don't have to have. We can have save the date, here's our theme.
Well, last time we had cool pictures, and the year that we had the cool pictures with the kids and the bugs and the bikes and stuff, I think that got us really good
We
exposure.
have the pictures from last year.
Yeah,
I can-
so yeah,
That content stuff. I think
Yeah.
We're good.
Okay.
We'll have a save the date.
Okay.
We'll have a theme, same height, family friendly activities, and we can have some pictures from our last year or two, maybe definitely like the sheep.
The sheep.
And the robot, we got some of that. So-
okay.
And are you doing the food trucks?
We already do the food
Okay.
trucks, I already reached out to the
Kelly?
operations people.
Okay.
No, Kelly was from Sodexo, I went
Okay.
right to the.
Oh, good.
fleet,
Okay.
And he said that it would be better to talk after Thanksgiving. My perspective was, and feedback or not, two of them, the one vegan one, great, the Thai kind of one, great. We need another vendor, like the other one was a little slow. I'm thinking traditional Mexican restaurant vendor.
Yeah, be good, yeah.
Yeah.
And we can ask them for primarily vegan options. And 3,
Yeah.
again, I want them to just drop that guaranteed minimum down to like $1,000. And if we end up on the hook for a few hundred per truck, fine. I don't want to end up 300-400 per truck. Because
Yeah.
I think their guaranteed minimum was like 1,400 and Sodexo gave us money for that. I don't know how long that well's gonna be open.
Do we have ice cream or kid food at all?
Popeyes, yeah.
Popeyes?
So we have Popeye. I don't know if we didn't reach out to them yet, but I suspect they're.
Pop Nation did so well last year.
Pop
Yeah.
Nation, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what I mentioned earlier. I think it was great to just give it away. I don't know that we have to do it as a part of like, come bring your bike. I'm thinking first come, first served, first 100, we're gonna give them big that way. We open Earth Day, it's at.
Yeah.
We'll have at least the young kids and the families there that time.
And do you guys just want to put on your list kind of a formal communication to the other towns on when we're doing ours?
Oh, sure.
Just to Rachel
We met
and,
with Rachel, we had lunch with Rachel this week, and they're gonna do the collaborative with them again.
okay.
Is
Food
it on our
trucks.
day? Well, please do.
I think it's week before.
Please do, because that's big. If they're doing it on our day, we're gonna lose a lot of vendors for
Food
sure.
trucks, make sure one of them has turtle soup.
No, chocolate turtles, chocolate turtles.
All right, one of the two.
Perfect. Are there any other subcommittee reports or anything? Okay, perfect. I did want to provide an update on the Green Waste Facility Tour. We talked about that at the
Yes.
September meeting.
Highly
Um,
recommend it. I'm
Thanks.
in.
Bye.
Green Waste followed up with 3 dates that work for them. And so I wanted to share them with you, and I'll follow up in an email to see which dates work for you. But since I have a few of you here, let me just share them out. They are on Fridays, 2 dates in January. We're looking at Friday, January 17th, Friday, February 7th,
Yeah.
and Friday, February 28th. Sorry, only 1 day in January. Something to keep in mind with this is it's subject to the weather conditions. We will monitor the weather.
Which one, are they gonna take us all the way down to see the mulch one?
Yeah, so we would be seeing both
Oh,
sites. At the San Jose site is their waste facility site, and then in Gilroy, they have their organic waste facility site. And that's where, I don't think they produce the compost, but I think it's the next station of producing compost after a waste station in San Jose.
Yep.
So we would be seeing 2 of their sites, one in San Jose and one in Gilroy. It would be an all-day trip.
We will or will not see them make the compost.
We will not see them make the compost. I think that's their East Bay site.
Yeah.
And I'll follow up with them about that too.
Good, thanks.
And I
Yeah,
can,
worthwhile tour, you guys, if you
yeah,
can go.
I'll gather details and I'll send the virtual facility tour for you to look at. But I'll gather details about each of the sites and what they have to offer. And then I'll send you those 3 dates. If you could all get back to me with dates that work for you, that'd be great. As I mentioned, it would be an all-day trip, probably an 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Time slot. We would rent a van, give lunch, everything.
You can stay overnight in Salinas if you want, I guess, if you want to go down.
Hmm?
Go down and stay overnight in Salinas if you want Thursday night.
It's not as stinky as you'd think. You go in there and they have all these conveyor belts with people, and then they have, it's an AI-driven
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
thing that it's a combination
of
of
technology.
high tech and old tech, because it's,
Yeah.
in the end, it's a line of people.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. It's
And
definitely worthwhile.
I heard since when I went, they added a few more machines. I think 2 were AI-centered machines since
Yeah.
you went on the
Oh,
tour.
wow. So I
there'll
really
be
wanna see
even
it.
updates when we go in January.
Yeah.
So I'll
it's-
send those to you all. If you could follow up with me on those, that would be great. I'm hoping to schedule that this month or next month and start coordinating for a January, February tour or field trip.
Thanks. That'll be great.
Thank you.
All right. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. With that,
Should
can we adjourn the
Yeah.
meeting?
Yeah, I do.
Are you
I
gonna
move to
allow the
adjourn.
council- You can offer the council
Moved,
to go?
I've adjourned. I
One
vote for
second.
adjourning.
You said that.
We've adjourned.